Good evening. There are nights when waiting feels unbearable, when you want something so badly that patience seems impossible, when you've worked and still see no results. Tonight, we explore patience and perseverance, ancient Buddhist teachings about trusting the timing of your life, about enduring when nothing seems to be happening, about faith in the unseen work beneath the surface. Feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. Through 20 tales from mountain monasteries and quiet gardens, we'll discover that the greatest transformations happen slowly, invisibly, in their own time. These stories will show you that invisible growth is still growth, that patient effort builds foundations you cannot yet see. Take a slow breath in. Feel the air filling your lungs. Breathe out slowly, releasing any tension you've been carrying. Let your shoulders drop just a little. Let your jaw soften. Perhaps you're here because you're tired of waiting, tired of working without seeing progress, frustrated that your efforts don't show immediate results. If you're carrying something heavy tonight, a goal that feels impossibly far away, a dream that seems to be taking forever, you're not alone. Let these stories hold you. These teachings come from Buddhist traditions spanning centuries across Japan, China, Tibet, and Vietnam. They've guided countless seekers through the hardest lesson of all, learning to trust the process when you cannot yet see the destination. Rest now. Let yourself be cradled by these ancient truths. You are safe here. Nothing needs your attention right now. Just these stories, your breath, and this gentle unfolding of wisdom. Let us begin. The Bamboo Grove. In the mountains of southern China, there lived a young monk named Hui Neng, who had been assigned the humblest task in the monastery, tending the bamboo grove. Every morning before dawn, he would walk through the misty hillside, carrying water buckets, watering each bamboo plant with careful attention. The work was simple, repetitive, and utterly unremarkable. The other monks studied scriptures in the meditation hall. They chanted sutras that echoed through the valley. They sat in long meditation retreats that earned them praise from the abbot. But Hui Neng carried water to bamboo plants that showed no sign of growth. 5 years passed this way. 5 years of walking the same hillside, carrying the same buckets, watering the same empty patch of earth. The bamboo seeds had been planted when he arrived, and in all that time, not a single shoot had broken through the soil. The earth remained bare and brown. His teacher offered no explanation, no encouragement, no promise that anything would ever change. The other monks sometimes mocked him gently. What kind of gardener tends plants that never grow? What kind of practice yields no visible fruit? Hui Neng would smile and say nothing. He simply continued his morning walks, the water sloshing in his buckets, his feet wearing a path in the hillside. In the 6th year, on a morning like any other, something astonishing happened. As Hui Neng approached with his water buckets, he saw tiny green shoots poking through the earth. Not just one or two, but hundreds of them, emerging all across the grove. Within weeks, those shoots grew taller. Within months, they became saplings. Within a year, the hillside was transformed into a magnificent bamboo forest, stalks reaching 80 feet toward the sky, their leaves whispering secrets to the wind. The abbot came to visit the grove, his elderly face creased with satisfaction. He found Hui Neng sitting among the towering bamboo, his face peaceful and radiant. The teacher sat beside his student and spoke quietly. The bamboo was growing all along, he explained. For 5 years, it sent roots deep into the mountain, creating a foundation vast and unshakable. Those roots spread through rock and soil, creating a network that could support great height and strength. Only when that foundation was complete did the bamboo reveal itself above ground. Your practice is like this, the abbot said. 5 years, you have practiced patience without reward, without recognition, without any evidence that your effort mattered. But all that time you were growing where no one could see. You were sending roots of discipline, humility, and faith deep into the bedrock of your being. Now those roots can support anything. Now you are ready for the teachings that come next. Hui Neng looked at his teacher with tears in his eyes. He had thought himself forgotten, relegated to meaningless work while others advanced. But his teacher had known what he needed most was not scripture or meditation techniques, but the deep root system of patient endurance. Everything that came after would grow from that foundation. This teaching shows us something profound about the nature of growth, about work that happens in darkness, about the way true transformation requires invisible preparation. We live in a world that worships visible progress. We want to see results immediately. We want proof that our effort matters, that our time is not wasted, that we're moving toward something. When we work on ourselves, when we try to change difficult patterns or build new habits, we often feel like Hui Neng in that empty grove. We meditate every day but still feel anxious. We practice kindness but still get angry. We work so hard and see no difference. What we forget is that the most important work happens underground. Consider someone trying to heal from trauma. They go to therapy. They journal. They practice breathing exercises. But their nightmares continue. They still freeze when someone raises their voice. They wonder if anything is actually changing. But beneath the surface, neural pathways are slowly rewiring. The nervous system is gradually learning new responses. Like bamboo roots spreading through stone, healing is happening in places no one can see. Or think about learning a difficult skill. You practice piano every day for months, and your fingers still stumble. You practice public speaking, but your voice still shakes. You practice writing, but the words still feel awkward. Then suddenly, one day, something clicks. Suddenly you can play that difficult passage. Suddenly you speak with confidence. Suddenly the words flow. It feels like magic, like overnight transformation, but it isn't. It's the result of invisible accumulation, of patient practice building foundations you couldn't see. This happens with relationships too. You try to communicate better with your partner. You bite your tongue when you want to snap. You speak gently when you want to criticize. For months, nothing seems different. You still have the same arguments. Then one day you notice you didn't react the way you used to. One day your partner says you've changed. The work was happening all along, building new patterns beneath old reactions. What would it mean to trust invisible growth, to keep watering empty ground? Keep practicing when you see no progress. Keep trying when nothing seems to change, not because you're naive or foolish, but because you understand that the deepest work requires the longest preparation. The bamboo grove teaches us patience for our own becoming. It teaches us that 5 years of faithfulness to simple practice creates foundations that can support forests. It teaches us that nothing is wasted. Nothing is lost. Everything is growing toward its moment of emergence. Breathe gently now. Feel your chest rise and fall. Let yourself trust that you are growing in ways you cannot yet perceive. Let yourself believe that your patient effort is building something beneath the surface, something that will one day astonish you with its height and strength. Rest in this knowing. Rest in the faith that bamboo has, the faith that roots itself deeply before reaching skyward. Just this patient tending, just this trust in timing you cannot control. Just this. Let your body settle deeper now. Notice how your shoulders have perhaps softened, how your breathing has become more easeful. We continue with another tale of patience, this time from ancient Japan, where a young man learned that rushing only lengthens the journey. The taste of the sword, Matajuro Yagyu, was born into greatness. His father was the most famous swordsman in all of Japan, teacher to the shogun himself, a master whose name was spoken with reverence throughout the land. But Matajuro, despite his illustrious heritage, showed no natural talent for the sword. His movements were clumsy. His strikes lacked precision. His father watched him practice with growing disappointment until finally, with a heavy heart, he made a devastating pronouncement. "You will never be a swordsman," he told his son. "Find another path." The words shattered something in Matajuro. To be cast out by his own father, to be deemed unworthy of the family legacy, felt like a judgment on his entire existence. But instead of accepting defeat, Matajuro made a decision. He would prove his father wrong. He would become not just a swordsman, but a master. He would work harder than anyone had ever worked before. He traveled north to the mountains, seeking the legendary master, Banzo, an elderly swordsman who had retired to a remote hermitage. The journey took 3 weeks on foot, through mountain passes and dense forests. When Matajuro finally arrived, exhausted and determined, he bowed low before the old master and declared his intention. "I have come to learn the way of the sword. I will work harder than any student you've ever had. Please teach me." Banzo looked at the young man with eyes that seemed to see through to his bones. "You wish to learn swordsmanship. You cannot fulfill the requirements." Matajuro's heart sank, but he persisted. "How long will it take if I train with complete dedication?" the old master considered. "Perhaps 10 years. 10 years, Matajuro's impatience surged. "My father grows old. I must master the sword quickly so I can care for him and restore our family honor. If I work twice as hard, morning, noon, and night, never resting, how long then?" Banzo's expression didn't change. "Ah, if you're in such a hurry, perhaps 30 years. Matajuro stared in confusion. "Why would working harder take longer?" the master explained with perfect simplicity. "A person in such a hurry already has his attention split. One eye watches the goal, leaving only one eye to see the path. How can you learn properly when you're always looking ahead instead of being fully present with each step?" The young man finally understood. He bowed again, this time with genuine humility. "I understand, Master. I will be your student, however long it takes. I will trust your methods." Banzo accepted him, but with unusual conditions. "You may stay, but you will never speak of swords or sword fighting. You will never touch a sword, never watch the other students practice, never ask about technique. You will serve me by cooking my meals, cleaning my house, tending my garden, chopping wood, carrying water. Nothing more." Matajuro agreed, though the terms bewildered him. He had come to learn the sword, and he was forbidden from even mentioning it. Still, he kept his word. Every morning, he rose before dawn to prepare Banzo's breakfast. He swept the floors with careful attention. He weeded the garden, carried water from the distant well, chopped wood for the fire. His days fell into rhythms of simple labor. Weeks became months. Months became years. 3 years passed this way. 3 years of cooking and cleaning and gardening. 3 years without a single lesson in swordsmanship. Sometimes Matajuro felt despair creeping in. Had he wasted his youth on a master who had no intention of teaching him? Had he traveled all this way only to become a mere servant? He thought often of his father's rejection, of the goal that seemed no closer than when he'd arrived. Then one morning, as Matajuro stood at the stove stirring rice, he heard a sound behind him, the whisper of wood cutting air, and then impact. Banzo had struck him hard across the back with a wooden practice sword. The blow knocked the breath from him. Before he could recover, the master had disappeared back to his quarters without a word. The next day, as Matajuro swept the entrance, another strike came from behind, harder this time. The day after, as he carried water, another blow. From that day forward, the attacks never stopped. Banzo would appear without warning, at any hour, in any place, and strike. Matajuro learned to listen for the whisper of movement, to sense presence before he saw it, to never fully relax his awareness. He carried the sense of Banzo's sword constantly, like a taste in his mouth he couldn't wash away. While cooking, he kept his attention divided. One part focused on the rice, another part sensing the space behind him. While gardening, he worked with ears alert, ready to roll away from any strike. At night, he slept lightly, waking at the smallest sound. His whole being became tuned to constant readiness. He learned to move while working, to position himself strategically, to maintain awareness without thinking about it. The practice became unconscious, woven into every moment. Months of this training transformed him completely. His body moved with a fluidity he'd never possessed. His awareness extended in all directions simultaneously. His reactions became instant, bypassing thought entirely. One day, as Banzo attacked during breakfast preparation, Matajuro not only dodged but caught the practice sword mid-swing, taking it from his master's hands with impossible speed. The old master smiled, the first smile Matajuro had seen in 4 years. "You have learned," Banzo said simply. "You have learned what cannot be taught through technique or forms. You have learned presence. You have learned patience. You have learned that mastery grows not from adding knowledge, but from transforming your entire way of being. The sword is not in your hand, but in your awareness. Not in technique, but in your presence to each moment." Matajuro understood at last why rushing would have taken 30 years instead of 10. If he had insisted on learning forms and techniques, he would have accumulated knowledge without transformation. He would have learned to imitate mastery without becoming masterful. Instead, through 4 years of cooking and cleaning and dodging, through 4 years of patient service and constant awareness, he had become what his father said was impossible: a true swordsman. Within another year, his skills surpassed that of any warrior in the land. This story reveals something essential about how real change happens, about the difference between learning information and transforming ourselves, about why the slow path is actually the only path that leads where we want to go. In our modern world, we worship speed. We want quick results. We want the shortcut, the hack, the secret technique that will give us mastery. without the long discipline. Think about how we approach learning now. We want to watch a video and suddenly know a skill. We want to read a book and instantly embody its wisdom. We want to take a workshop and emerge transformed. When change doesn't happen immediately, we get frustrated. We wonder if we're doing it wrong. We look for a faster method, a better teacher, a more efficient approach. But what Matajuro learned is that certain kinds of change cannot be rushed precisely because they're not about acquiring information. They're about becoming different at a foundational level. You cannot speed up the growth of character any more than you can speed up the growth of oak trees. Both require time, patience, and the right conditions. Consider someone trying to change their relationship with anger. They read about mindfulness. They learn techniques for breathing through difficult emotions. They understand intellectually why reacting in anger causes harm. But knowledge doesn't transform them. The next time someone cuts them off in traffic, they still explode with rage. The next time their teenager talks back, they still say things they regret. Why? Because transformation isn't about knowing better. It's about becoming different. Real change happens through exactly what Matajuro experienced, through patient repetition that rewires our automatic responses. Through being present to our patterns again and again until new patterns form. Through the slow accumulation of moments where we choose differently, choose differently, choose differently, until the new choice becomes natural, until it becomes who we are. This happens when we try to establish a meditation practice. At first, sitting still feels unbearable. Our mind races. Our body fidgets. We count the minutes until we can stop. We wonder if meditation even works. But if we return to the cushion every day, if we sit through the discomfort without giving up, slowly something changes. Not because we learn new techniques, but because our nervous system itself begins to shift. Our relationship to discomfort transforms. We develop a kind of patience with ourselves that cannot be taught, only grown. Or think about becoming a better listener in your relationships. You cannot learn this by reading about active listening techniques. You have to practice it in real conversations. You have to notice yourself interrupting and practice pausing. You have to catch yourself formulating responses while the other person is still speaking and practice truly attending. You have to do this hundreds of times, maybe thousands, catching yourself, adjusting, trying again. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, you become someone who listens. Not because you remember techniques, but because listening has become part of who you are. What would it mean to accept that the things you most want to change about yourself might take years to transform, not because you're slow or broken, but because real transformation happens at the pace of root systems and character formation? What if you stopped looking for shortcuts and instead committed to patient, daily practice? The taste of Banzo's sword teaches us that when we're in too much of a hurry, we actually slow ourselves down. Our impatience scatters our attention. Our focus on the goal pulls us out of presence with the practice itself. We learn less because we're always somewhere else, always ahead of ourselves, always wishing we were further along instead of being fully present to where we are. Let yourself breathe into this teaching. Let yourself feel the relief of giving up the demand for instant transformation. Let yourself settle into the long work of becoming, knowing that patience itself is part of the practice, that learning to trust the process is inseparable from the transformation you seek. Just this moment of practice, just this willingness to show up again, just this faith that invisible work is accumulating, building something you cannot yet see, but will one day embody completely. Just this patient becoming. Just this. Your breath continues, steady and calm. Your body rests more deeply with each exhale. Let yourself drift as we turn to another teaching, this time from Tibet, about a student who learned that enlightenment cannot be grasped, only grown. The stone Buddha. In a remote Tibetan monastery high in the Himalayas, there lived a young nun named Pema who was known for her fierce determination. While other students approached their practice with gentle persistence, Pema attacked hers like a warrior storming a fortress. She would meditate until her legs went numb and pain shot through her spine. She would prostrate until her forehead bled from touching the floor. She fasted until she grew weak and dizzy. She was determined to achieve enlightenment through sheer force of will. Her teacher, an old monk named Rinchen, watched her intensity with concern. He had seen this pattern before: young practitioners who confused spiritual effort with violent self-discipline, who thought they could force open the doors that only patience could unlock. One day, he called Pema to his quarters and handed her a small stone, smooth and grey, the size of a robin's egg. "Your new practice," he told her, "is to carry this stone with you always. Keep it in your pocket during the day. Place it beside your bed at night. Every morning, polish it with a soft cloth until it shines. Every evening, hold it in your palm and feel its weight. Do this every day without fail." And then he added the instruction that made no sense to her. "Do not ask how long this will take." Pema stared at the stone, confused and frustrated. "I didn't come here to polish rocks," she protested. "I came to attain enlightenment. I need advanced practices, deep meditation techniques, profound teachings. This is child's play." Rinchen smiled gently. "Then you are not ready for advanced practices. Begin with this." She wanted to argue, but something in her teacher's calm certainty stopped her. "Fine," she said, taking the stone. "I'll do this foolish task until you see I'm ready for real practice." She slipped the stone into her robe pocket and left, already planning to prove herself through perfect obedience to this simple assignment. The first week, Pema polished the stone with aggressive efficiency. She would pull it out, rub it vigorously with her cloth, and shove it back in her pocket, the whole process taking less than a minute. She held it each evening with impatience, tapping her foot, waiting for enough time to pass that she could set it down and return to her meditation cushion. "This isn't teaching me anything," she muttered to herself. But Rinchen had instructed her to continue, so she did. Week became month. Month became season. She polished the stone every morning, held it every evening. Gradually, something began to shift. She noticed that, when she rushed the polishing, it didn't shine as brightly. When she slowed down, moving the cloth in patient circles, the stone's surface began to glow with a soft luster. So she began polishing more carefully, though still with a hint of resentment. The holding in the evening also changed. At first, she had simply gripped the stone impatiently, thinking about all the other things she should be doing. But one evening, exhausted from a day of hard work, she simply rested her palm around the stone without any agenda. She felt its coolness, its smooth roundness, its slight weight. For just a moment, there was nothing but the stone in her hand and her hand holding the stone. No urgency, no striving, just presence. That moment of simple presence startled her. She realized she had been rushing through every moment of her life, always leaning toward the next thing, never fully present to what was actually happening. Even her meditation was infected with this rushing, this constant reaching toward some imagined enlightenment instead of being present to the actual experience of sitting. From that evening forward, her relationship with the stone practice changed. She began to genuinely enjoy the morning polishing, watching light play across its increasingly lustrous surface. She began to look forward to the evening holding, that moment of pure presence with no goal beyond simply being with what is. The stone became her teacher in a way Rinpoche's lectures never had been. Seasons turned into years. 3 years of polishing, of holding, of gradually learning to be present without striving. The stone itself transformed from dull grey to a rich, deep shine, smooth as silk, beautiful in its simplicity. But the greater transformation was in Pema herself. Her whole demeanor had changed. Where, once she had moved through the monastery like a storm, all urgency and intensity, she now moved with a quality of present attention. She still worked hard, still practiced diligently, but without the violent grasping that had characterized her earlier years. One morning, as she polished the stone with her customary care, Rinchen appeared beside her. He sat down slowly, his old bones creaking. "Tell me what you have learned," he said. Pema held the stone up to the light, watching it catch the sun. "I have learned that I cannot force anything," she said quietly. "I have learned that transformation happens through patient presence, not aggressive striving. I have learned that being fully with this moment is the practice, not achieving some future state. The stone hasn't changed me through some magic property. It's changed me by teaching me how to stop rushing long enough to actually be present to my life." Rinchen nodded, his eyes warm with approval. "The stone is no different than 3 years ago, except that you have polished away its rough surface. You are no different than 3 years ago, except that you have polished away your own rough hurry, your own grasping urgency. This is the only enlightenment there is. Learning to be fully present to what is. Learning to polish each moment with gentle care instead of attacking it with violent effort. You are ready now for advanced practice. You have been doing advanced practice all along." He reached into his own robe and pulled out another stone, worn smooth by decades of holding. "I too polish and hold every day," he said. "After 60 years of practice, I still need this reminder to slow down, to be present, to stop grasping at something other than this. Keep your stone always. Let it remind you that the path is made of moments, each one requiring only your full presence, each one an opportunity to practice patience with yourself and your life." Pema bowed deeply to her teacher, tears streaming down her face. She finally understood what she had been seeking all along was not some distant, enlightened state, but this simple capacity to be fully present, to meet each moment with patient attention, to stop grasping at future attainment and simply polish this moment, this breath, this stone. This teaching speaks directly to our modern disease of spiritual materialism, the way we turn even our search for peace into another achievement we're desperately trying to accomplish. We want enlightenment the way we want a promotion or a new car, as a thing we can attain through sufficient effort and determination. But this approach only creates more suffering, not less. Think about how we approach meditation or therapy or personal growth. We start with a problem. I'm anxious. I'm depressed. I'm stuck in bad patterns. and we look for a solution to fix it as quickly as possible. We measure progress like a business metric. We get frustrated when we don't see immediate results. We switch therapists or meditation techniques or self-help books, always seeking the method that will finally give us what we're after. But this seeking itself is the problem. This constant reaching towards somewhere else instead of being present to where we are. Consider someone dealing with anxiety. They learn about mindfulness. They start meditating, hoping it will make the anxiety disappear. But every meditation session, they're subtly checking. Is the anxiety gone? Yet has it decreased? Why am I still anxious? This constant evaluation, this desperate grasping at a future anxiety-free state, actually increases their anxiety. They're not being present with what is. They're fighting against what is, trying to force it into what they want it to be. What if instead they approach their practice the way Pema learned to polish her stone? What if they simply showed up every day to be present with whatever was actually happening, including the anxiety, not trying to make it go away, not judging themselves for still having it, just being present with gentleness and patience? Paradoxically, this acceptance often allows the anxiety to ease, not because we tried to fix it, but because we stopped fighting it. Or think about someone trying to build better habits. They want to exercise regularly, eat healthier, be more organized. They attack these goals with initial enthusiasm, working out intensely, eating perfectly, organizing everything all at once. But this kind of intensity cannot be sustained. Within weeks or months, they burn out. They give up. They feel like failures. The problem wasn't lack of willpower. The problem was trying to force change instead of allowing it to grow naturally through patient daily practice. What Pema learned through 3 years with her stone is that transformation cannot be grasped. It can only be grown, like plants from seeds, through consistent tending. You cannot force a seed to sprout faster by pulling on it. You cannot make a plant grow taller by stretching its stem. You can only provide the right conditions, water and light and nutrients, and then wait with patience, trusting the intelligence of the seed itself. This same principle applies to every kind of personal transformation. You cannot force yourself to be more patient by being angry at your impatience. You cannot force yourself to be kinder by hating yourself for your meanness. You cannot force yourself to be more present by constantly judging yourself for being distracted. You can only create the conditions for growth, regular practice, gentle self-compassion, patient persistence, and then trust the process. The stone practice teaches us that the point is never to finish, never to achieve some permanent enlightened state where we no longer need practice. The point is to polish each day, to hold each moment with presence, to return again and again to simple being. This is the practice. Not preparation for some future accomplishment, but the thing itself, the only thing there ever is. What would your life be like if you stopped trying to get somewhere and instead committed to being fully present to where you are? If you approached each day as an opportunity to polish this moment with careful attention rather than rush through it towards some imagined better future? If you held your life with the same patient presence that Pema learned to hold her stone, breathe into this possibility. Feel how your whole being relaxes when you stop demanding that you be different than you are, that your life be other than it is. Feel the relief of simply polishing this moment, this breath, this experience exactly as it presents itself. Nothing to fix, nowhere to get to, just this patient presence with what is. Just this stone, just this moment, just this breath, Just this gentle polishing of the rough surface of rushing and grasping until something smooth and beautiful is revealed. Just this. Just this willingness to be exactly where you are. Just this. Let your body sink deeper into stillness. Notice how your mind has become quieter, more settled, like water that has stopped being stirred and is now finding its own clarity. We turn now to ancient China, where a farmer learned about the patience of seasons. The farmer's wisdom. In a small village in northern China, there lived an old farmer whose fields bordered those of his neighbors. Everyone in the village knew him as a man of few words but steady presence. His field was neither the largest nor the most productive. Yet year after year, he harvested enough to feed his family, with some left over to share. What set him apart was not his skill or his luck, but his temperament. He never seemed hurried or worried, never anxious about weather or timing, never rushed through his work or fretted about outcomes. One spring, as farmers across the region rushed to plant their seeds early, hoping to get ahead of others, to be first to market, to maximize their profits, the old farmer moved at his customary measured pace. He tilled his soil carefully, not rushing, turning each row with attention. He prepared the ground thoroughly, removing stones and weeds, working compost into the earth until it was soft and rich. Other farmers had already planted while he was still preparing. His neighbors watched with thinly veiled contempt. "Old fool," they muttered. "By the time he plants, everyone else will be weeks ahead. He'll miss the best growing season. He'll come to market late." Some even felt sorry for him, mistaking his patience for slowness, his thoroughness for inefficiency. But the old farmer simply continued his work, neither hurrying nor delaying, moving in rhythm with something deeper than market pressures and competitive anxiety. When he finally planted, he did so with the same careful attention. He pressed each seed into the soil at exactly the right depth, spaced exactly the right distance apart. He watered thoughtfully, testing the soil's moisture with his fingers, giving just what was needed. Not too much, not too little. While other farmers had moved on to other concerns, he tended his newly planted field with complete presence. Weeks passed. The neighbors' crops sprouted first, their fields turning green, while the old farmer's field remained brown earth. "See," the neighbors said to each other, "we were right. He planted too late. His crop will be stunted, his harvest poor." But the old farmer showed no concern. He watched the sky, felt the air, observed his soil with the same patient attention he brought to everything. Then his seeds began to sprout, and his neighbors noticed something interesting. His plants emerged strong and uniform, their leaves deep green, their stems sturdy. The early planted crops in neighboring fields, while ahead in size, looked somehow less vital, their leaves a paler green, their stems thinner. Still, the neighbors dismissed this. Size matters, they told themselves. Being first matters. The old farmer's crop, though healthier looking, was weeks behind. Summer arrived hot and dry. Drought settled over the region, baking the earth, stressing every living thing. The neighbors' crops, which had grown quickly in the early season, now suffered. Their shallow root systems, formed rapidly in easy conditions, couldn't reach deep enough to find moisture. The plants wilted, leaves yellowed and curled. Farmers worked frantically, hauling water from the village well, but the soil was so dry that water ran across the surface without penetrating. The old farmer's field told a different story. His plants, which had grown more slowly, had sent roots deep into the earth, seeking water and nutrients. Now, when the surface was dust and the air was furnace hot, those deep roots found moisture that the early crops could not access. His plants stood firm and green, while all around them other fields withered. The neighbors watched in amazement and, gradually, in understanding. The old farmer hadn't been slow. He had been thorough. He hadn't been late. He had been waiting for the right time. He hadn't lacked urgency. He had possessed something deeper than urgency, wisdom about the nature of growth, about the importance of foundations, about the difference between being first and being sustainable. One evening, several neighbors came to his house. They found him sitting on his porch watching the sunset, as calm as ever. "We thought you were foolish," one of them admitted. "We thought your slow ways would bring you failure. But your crop is the healthiest in the region, while ours are failing. How did you know to plant when you did? How did you know to prepare so carefully? How do you remain so unconcerned with competition and timing?" The old farmer was quiet for a long moment, as was his way. Then he spoke in his soft, unhurried voice. "I do not try to be first. I try to be ready. The soil must be truly ready before seeds are planted, not just convenient. The plant must be allowed to develop roots before pushing leaves, not rushed into early growth that cannot be sustained. I plant when the earth tells me to plant, not when fear or greed or competition tells me. I water when the plant needs water, not on a schedule dictated by convenience. I wait because that is what wisdom requires. Being first means nothing if you cannot endure. Having the largest early growth means nothing if you lack the foundation to sustain it." He gestured at his field, dark green in the fading light. "These plants will produce well into autumn when your early crops are finished. They will give high-quality vegetables because they were never stressed into premature production. They will yield abundantly because their roots are deep and their growth was paced correctly. This is not luck. This is not secret knowledge. This is simply honoring the pace that nature requires, resisting the urge to rush what cannot be rushed without cost." The neighbors returned to their own fields with a new understanding. The old farmer's wisdom had been available to them all along, visible in his unhurried movements, audible in his patient silence. But they had been too caught up in urgency to recognize what they were seeing. From that season forward, several of them began to change their approach, planting not by calendar or competition but by observation and readiness, tending with presence rather than anxiety, harvesting not for maximum speed but for optimal quality. As for the old farmer, he continued as he always had, moving through the seasons with patient attention, letting each thing unfold in its own time, neither rushing nor delaying, but simply being present to what each day required. His field flourished year after year, not through any trick or special advantage, but through the simple power of patience aligned with natural law, of human effort that works with time rather than against it. This story speaks to something we've forgotten in our fast-paced modern world: the wisdom of waiting for readiness, the power of deep foundations, the way sustainable success grows slowly and cannot be rushed. We live in a culture that worships speed. Fast food, fast internet, fast results. We've convinced ourselves that faster is always better, that being first is what matters, that patience is just another word for being behind. But think about the cost of our collective rushing. Consider how we approach education. We push children to read earlier and earlier, to take advanced classes before they're ready, to build resumes from elementary school, all in service of getting ahead. But ahead of what? What we often create are shallow learners who can regurgitate information but haven't developed the deep curiosity and resilience that comes from learning at a pace that allows for genuine understanding. Or look at how we approach career development. We want to climb the ladder quickly, jump to leadership positions before we've truly mastered foundational skills. We job hop for faster advancement, accumulate impressive titles, but sometimes without the deep competence that comes from patient mastery. Then, when real challenges come, when the drought arrives, we discover our roots aren't deep enough to sustain us. We've been growing leaves and stems, but neglecting the underground work that creates lasting strength. This happens in relationships too. We rush into commitment before we truly know someone. We escalate intimacy quickly, confusing intensity for depth. We want to skip the slow work of building trust and understanding. Then when difficulty comes, when the relationship is tested, we discover we don't have the foundation to weather it. Like plants with shallow roots, we wilt under stress because we never took the time to grow deep. The farmer's wisdom teaches us that there are two kinds of timing: the timing of competition and anxiety and urgency, and the timing of readiness and natural pace and sustainable growth. The first creates quick results that cannot last. The second creates slower development that can endure anything. The first looks impressive early on. The second looks unimpressive until the test comes, and then its superiority becomes obvious. What would it mean to approach your life more like the farmer, to prepare thoroughly before beginning, to allow things to develop at their natural pace rather than forcing premature growth, to measure success not by how fast you achieve something, but by how sustainable your achievement is, to wait for readiness rather than rush at every opportunity. This doesn't mean being passive or lazy. The farmer worked just as hard as his neighbors, probably harder because his work was more thorough, but his effort was paced differently. It was aligned with natural timing rather than fighting against it. He expended his energy on depth rather than speed, on preparation rather than hurry, on sustainability rather than immediate results. You cannot rush the development of deep roots. You cannot force a seed to sprout faster by pulling on it. You cannot make soil ready before it's ready by simply deciding it's time to plant. These are laws of nature, and human development follows the same laws. You cannot rush the healing of trauma. You cannot force the building of character. You cannot speed up the development of wisdom. You can only create the right conditions and then wait with patient attention while the underground work happens. Think about an area of your life where you've been rushing, where you've been trying to force results before the foundation is solid. Maybe it's a new business you're building, and you're pushing for revenue before you've truly developed your offering. Maybe it's a personal transformation you're attempting, and you're frustrated that you're not changing faster. Maybe it's a skill you're learning, and you keep trying to skip the boring fundamentals to get to the advanced techniques. What if you slowed down? What if you spent more time on preparation, on building foundation, on allowing roots to develop before pushing for visible growth? It might feel like falling behind. It might look like you're not making progress. But when the test comes, when drought arrives in whatever form it takes in your life, you'll discover that your slow thoroughness has created something that can endure what others' quick urgency cannot. Breathe with this teaching. Feel how your nervous system relaxes when you give yourself permission to develop at your own natural pace. Feel the relief of letting go of the race, the competition, the anxious urgency to be further along than you are. You are exactly where you need to be, building exactly what needs to be built, at exactly the pace that creates lasting strength. Just this preparation, just this careful tending, just this patient development of what cannot be rushed, just this faith that deep roots, though invisible and slow to form, create sustainability that quick growth never can. Just this trust in natural timing. Just this. Your breathing has become so gentle now, so quiet, like whispers in a still room. Let yourself float on these words as we journey to a mountain monastery where a student learned that the path itself is the destination. The monastery garden in the mountains of northern Japan, where winter snows buried the world for half the year, there stood an ancient Zen monastery. Its garden was famous throughout the region, a masterpiece of rocks and raked gravel, of carefully pruned pines and moss-covered stones. Monks from other temples would make pilgrimages just to sit in that garden and feel its peace. A young monk named Kenji had heard about this garden before he ever arrived at the monastery. When he finally became a student there, he was thrilled to learn that the garden would be part of his responsibilities. He imagined himself sitting in meditation among those perfect stones, absorbing the wisdom the garden embodied, becoming enlightened through proximity to such beauty. On his first morning, the head gardener, an elderly monk named Gensho, led him out into the garden. Kenji expected instruction in the philosophy of Zen gardens, the meaning of rock placement, the symbolism of raked patterns. Instead, Gensho handed him a rake and said simply, "Every morning you will rake these gravel paths. Make them smooth. Make them beautiful. Make them new." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Kenji standing alone with his rake. That first morning, Kenji approached the raking with enthusiasm. He pulled the rake through the gravel, creating pleasing parallel lines. He worked around the stones carefully, making graceful curves. Within an hour he had finished, and he stood back to admire his work. Not bad, he thought. With practice, I'll become even better. Then I'll be ready for the deeper teachings. The next morning, Gensho appeared at dawn and without a word walked through the garden, his feet disturbing all of Kenji's careful patterns. "Rake it again," he said. Kenji's enthusiasm dimmed slightly, but he set to work, recreating what he had done the day before. This continued day after day, week after week. Every morning, Kenji raked the paths smooth. Every evening, or the next morning, someone would walk through them, or wind would scatter leaves across them, or rain would disturb them. And every morning he would rake them smooth again. After 3 months, Kenji's enthusiasm had transformed into frustration. What was the point of this endless repetition? He wasn't learning anything new. He wasn't advancing toward any goal. He was simply doing the same task over and over, with no progress, no completion, no achievement. One morning, as he raked with barely concealed resentment, Gensho appeared beside him. "You are angry," the old monk observed. "Yes," Kenji admitted. "I've been raking this garden for 3 months. I've learned how to make beautiful patterns. I've mastered the technique, but I'm not progressing. I'm not moving forward. I'm just doing the same thing every single day. When do I get to learn the real teachings? When do I advance to something more meaningful?" Gensho sat down on a stone bench and watched Kenji rake for several minutes before speaking. You believe you have mastered this task. Yes, Kenji said. I can make the patterns perfectly now. Then you have understood nothing, Gensho said gently. You have learned technique. You have not learned what the raking teaches. You think you are preparing the garden. The garden is preparing you. Kenji stopped raking and stared at his teacher. I don't understand. Of course you don't, Gensho said with a slight smile. But you will. Continue. Kenji returned to his raking, bewildered and frustrated. But something in Gensho's certainty made him determined to figure out what he was missing. He began to pay closer attention, not just to the mechanics of raking, but to his experience while raking. He noticed that when he raked while thinking about being finished, the work felt tedious. When he raked while resenting the fact that it would need to be done again tomorrow, the work felt pointless. When he raked while comparing himself to other students who seemed to have more advanced assignments, the work felt demeaning. But occasionally, for just a few moments, his mind would quiet and he would simply rake. In those moments, there was no tedium, no resentment, no comparison. There was just the sound of the rake through gravel, the emerging pattern, the feel of the wooden handle in his hands, the cool morning air on his face. Those moments were peaceful in a way nothing else in his life had been. In those moments, he wasn't trying to get anywhere or become anything. He was simply present with what he was doing. The moment he noticed this and tried to recreate it, the peace vanished. But gradually, over months, those moments of simple presence grew longer and more frequent. A year passed. Then another. Kenji no longer asked when he would move on to other assignments. He no longer felt he had mastered the raking. Every morning, he discovered something new. The way morning light played across fresh raked gravel. The slight difference in resistance depending on moisture levels. The satisfaction of a particularly smooth stroke. The beauty in the inevitable imperfection of a pattern disturbed by a falling leaf. He began to love the task, not despite its repetition, but because of it. One morning, as he raked in complete presence, no thought of past or future, no judgment or comparison, just raking for its own sake, Gensho appeared and sat on the bench. The old monk watched for a long time before speaking. Now you understand, he said quietly. Kenji paused and looked at his teacher. What do I understand that there is nowhere to get to? Gensho said. That practice is not preparation for life, but life itself. That you were looking for teachings in some imagined future, while the teaching was here all along in this task you thought was preliminary. You have learned patience, not as a means to enlightenment, but as enlightenment itself. You have learned to be fully present to what is, rather than always reaching toward what might be. This is the great teaching. The garden has been teaching you since your first day, but you could only learn it by raking, by showing up every morning, by doing what seemed pointless until you finally understood that nothing is pointless when done with complete presence. Kenji bowed deeply, tears on his face. The garden that had seemed like a stage to pass through had become his greatest teacher. The task that had seemed like preparation had been the practice itself. The path he thought was leading somewhere had been the destination all along. He continued to rake the garden every morning for many more years, and he never tired of it. Each day was new because he was new, present to that particular morning's unique gift. He had learned the patience to be fully alive in each moment, rather than constantly rushing toward the next. This teaching speaks to perhaps the deepest form of patience, the patience to be present to the ordinary tasks of our lives, instead of always treating them as stepping stones to something more important. We are all like young Kenji in some way, going through the motions of daily life while waiting for real life to begin. We see our current circumstances as preliminary. We tell ourselves that when we get the promotion, when we finish school, when we find the right relationship, when we retire, when we fix this problem, then we'll really start living. But this attitude means we spend our entire lives in a waiting room, never fully present to the room we're actually in. The dishes we're washing become just an obstacle to the thing we really want to do. The commute we're taking becomes just dead time between meaningful moments. The job we're working becomes just a means to the money we need for the life we'll live later. We're always somewhere else, always in the future, always waiting for the real thing to start. Think about how you approach your daily routines. When you're brushing your teeth, are you there, or are you already in your car driving to work? When you're making breakfast, are you present to the smell of coffee and the sound of eggs in the pan? Or are you mentally rehearsing your day? When you're in conversation with your child or partner, are you fully listening, or are you partly planning what's next on your schedule? We spend so much of our lives on autopilot, going through motions while our attention is somewhere else. What if you approached your daily tasks the way Kenji finally learned to approach the raking? What if washing dishes became an opportunity to feel warm water on your hands? To watch light play through soap bubbles? To experience the simple satisfaction of making something clean? What if your commute became a chance to notice the changing seasons? To listen to music or podcasts that actually enrich you? To practice being present with whatever arises, instead of fighting against traffic. This doesn't mean romanticizing difficult work or pretending that tedious tasks are inherently fulfilling. It means recognizing that those tasks are your life. And if you're not present to them, you're not present to your life. It means understanding that there is no other moment than this one. No other life than the one you're living right now. And if you can't find meaning in raking gravel, you won't find it in some imagined enlightened future either. The monastery garden teaches us that practice is not preparation for something else. Practice is life. The patience we bring to ordinary tasks is not developing us for future wisdom. It is wisdom itself. When we can be fully present to washing dishes, we can be fully present to anything. When we can find peace in repetitive work, we can find peace anywhere. When we can show up with complete attention to tasks that will need to be done again tomorrow, we have learned something that cannot be taught in books or lectures. Consider how this applies to parenting. How many moments with your children do you miss because you're thinking about work, or worried about finances, or mentally planning dinner? Those small, ordinary moments, reading the same bedtime story for the 100th time, helping with homework, making snacks, that is your time with them. There is no special quality time separate from all those ordinary moments. If you cannot be present to the ordinary, you will miss your children's childhood waiting for some imagined meaningful experience that was there all along, disguised as the routine of daily life. Or think about your work. Maybe you're in a job you don't love, doing tasks you don't find inherently meaningful. You might think this is just what you have to do until you find your real calling, until you make enough money to do what you really want, until life finally begins. But this job, these tasks, this is your life right now. Years of it. If you cannot find a way to be present to it, to bring attention and care to even boring tasks, you will have spent years of your life in a waiting room that never leads to where you think it leads. What would it mean to stop treating your present circumstances as preliminary, to stop waiting for real life to start and recognize that it started the moment you were born and continues until you die? to bring complete presence to whatever this moment contains, whether it's profound or mundane, pleasant or difficult, important or ordinary. Breathe into this possibility. Feel what happens in your body when you stop straining towards some imagined future and simply arrive completely in this moment, this breath, this experience. Feel the relief of letting the garden teach you through raking it every day, of letting life teach you through showing up fully to its endless ordinary repetition. Just this moment, just this task, just this simple presence with what is, without judgment, without wishing it was something else, without waiting for something better. Just this patient presence with the garden of your actual life. Just this. Your whole body rests now in deep stillness. Your mind floats like a leaf on calm water. Let us move to another ancient teaching, this time about a potter who learned that perfection comes through countless imperfections. The potter's 10,000 bowls. In a village famous for its pottery, there lived a young woman named Aiko who dreamed of creating the perfect tea bowl. She had apprenticed herself to an elderly master potter named Masato, hoping to learn the secret technique that would allow her to create a masterpiece. She imagined the bowl she would make, perfectly symmetrical, with walls of ideal thickness, a glaze that captured the exact color of moonlight on water. This bowl would make her famous. This bowl would prove her mastery. Master Masato worked in a small studio behind his house, a dim space filled with the earthy smell of clay and the lingering ghosts of 1,000 fires. On Aiko's first day, she expected him to teach her his most refined techniques. Instead, he led her to a huge pile of clay and demonstrated the most basic bowl-making process, centering clay on the wheel, raising walls, shaping a simple form. Then he said, "Make 1,000 bowls just like this. Nothing fancy, nothing special. Just simple, functional bowls. When you have made 1,000, come find me." Aiko was disappointed but determined. She would make these 1,000 bowls as quickly as possible, master the basic technique, and then move on to the real work of creating her perfect tea bowl. She sat at the wheel and began. The first bowl collapsed as she raised the walls. The second was lopsided. The third split as she removed it from the wheel. But gradually she found a rhythm. Within a few days she could make simple bowls consistently. After 2 weeks, she had made 50 bowls. None particularly beautiful, but all functional. They sat drying on shelves around the studio. She began to get bored with the repetition. They all looked essentially the same. What was she learning? But Masato had said 1,000. So she continued. Bowl after bowl after bowl. Some days she worked quickly, hurrying through the task. Other days she worked more slowly, trying to add some variation, some small uniqueness to each piece. After 3 months, she had made 300 bowls. Her hands moved through the motions automatically now. She could center clay, raise walls, shape a bowl without thinking about it. Her mind wandered while her hands worked. She thought about the perfect bowl she would make someday. She imagined teaching students of her own, famous for her technique. But mostly she just made bowls, one after another. A mountain of simple clay vessels filling every surface in the studio. At 6 months, she reached 500. Halfway there, she noticed something interesting. While the bowls were all made using the same basic process, no two were exactly alike. Each had slight variations in proportion, in the curve of the wall, in the thickness of the rim. She began to see these variations not as flaws, but as the personality of each piece. This bowl leaned slightly. That bowl had walls a bit thicker. This one was fractionally taller. They were like siblings, clearly related, but each unique. She also noticed that her best bowls came not when she tried to make them perfect, but when she simply made them with relaxed attention. The bowls she made while straining for perfection were tight and rigid. The bowls she made while lost in the rhythm of the work had a natural ease to them, an organic quality that felt alive rather than manufactured. She began to understand something about control and surrender, about trying and allowing. After a year, she was approaching 1,000. Her hands were no longer those of a beginner. They had developed a sensitivity she hadn't possessed before. She could feel minute differences in the clay, could sense when the wall was too thin before it collapsed, could judge the moisture content by touch. Her body had learned what her mind could never have understood. The wisdom was in her hands now, embodied and instinctive. When she finally completed the 1,000th bowl, she sat for a moment looking at it. A simple clay form, not particularly different from the other 999. She felt oddly emotional. A year of her life had gone into these repetitive forms. A year she had thought was just preparation. She carried the final bowl to Masato's house and found him drinking tea in his garden. "I have completed 1,000 bowls," she announced, placing the bowl before him. Masato looked at it for a long moment, then at her. "Good," he said simply. "Now make 10,000 more." Aiko stared at him in shock. 10,000 more, but I've already mastered the technique. I'm ready for advanced teaching. I'm ready to make the perfect bowl." Masato smiled gently. "You have learned technique. You have not yet learned what I wanted you to learn. Go. Make 10,000 more. Then we will talk." Aiko wanted to argue, to protest that this was a waste of her time. But something in her had changed during that first 1,000. She trusted that her teacher saw something she didn't yet see. She returned to the studio and began again. Bowl 1001, 1002, 1003. The years passed. Her 20s became her 30s. Her hair, which had been black when she started, began to show threads of grey. Something profound happened during those years. In the beginning, she had been making bowls while waiting to make the perfect bowl. But gradually, the making itself became the point. Each bowl, though similar to thousands before it, was its own unique event. Each time she centered clay, she was meeting this particular clay in this particular moment. Each bowl taught her something subtle, a tiny adjustment in pressure, a fractional difference in timing, a nuance of feeling and response. The learning never stopped because the work was never quite the same twice. She stopped counting after 5,000. The number became irrelevant. She made bowls because making bowls was what she did. Some were more beautiful than others. Some were more successful than others. But each one was complete in itself. Not preparation for some future perfect bowl, but a bowl that existed for its own sake, made with whatever attention and skill she possessed in that moment. One day, after she had been working for 12 years, Masato appeared in the studio. He looked at the thousands of bowls lining every surface, at Aiko sitting at the wheel, her hands moving with unconscious mastery, her face peaceful and absorbed. He watched her complete a bowl and set it aside to dry, then begin another. After she finished that one, she looked up and noticed him standing there. "Now you understand," he said. Aiko smiled. "Yes, I understand. You were never waiting for me to achieve some technical perfection. You were waiting for me to give up the idea of perfection, to understand that mastery is not in making the perfect bowl, but in bringing complete presence to the making of this bowl, whatever this bowl becomes. You were teaching me patience with the endless process of learning, which never ends because life never stops presenting new clay, new conditions, new moments that require presence and response." Masato nodded. "And if I asked you now to make your perfect tea bowl, what would you do?" "I would make a bowl," Aiko said simply. "Just another bowl. It would be unique because every bowl is unique. It might be beautiful or it might be ordinary, but it would be complete because it would be made with complete presence. I don't need to make a perfect bowl anymore. I just need to make this bowl, right now, with whatever skill and attention I have in this moment. That is the perfection. Not in the object, but in the making." The old master smiled, his eyes warm with approval. "You are ready now to teach others. Not because you have achieved some endpoint, but because you understand there is no endpoint. Only this endless practice of showing up to the wheel, meeting the clay, bringing presence to the work. This is mastery, not as destination, but as way of being. Go make more bowls. You will make them until the day you die, and you will never make the same bowl twice, and you will never exhaust the teaching that clay offers. This is the path. This is enough." This story speaks to our modern obsession with mastery as achievement, with expertise as a thing you attain and then possess. We want to learn something thoroughly and then be done learning. We want to reach a level where we no longer need to practice. We want to arrive at mastery so we can finally relax. But this fundamentally misunderstands what mastery is. Mastery is not a destination. It's a way of relating to practice itself, a way of bringing complete presence to repetition that never ends. Think about any skill you've tried to develop. Maybe it's playing an instrument. In the beginning, you practice basic scales and simple songs. You imagine the day when you'll play advanced pieces effortlessly, when you'll have mastered the instrument. But if you stay with it long enough, you discover something interesting. The better you get, the more you realize how much more there is to learn. Advanced players still practice scales, still work on fundamentals, because every time they meet those fundamentals, they discover new subtleties. Or consider meditation practice. Beginners often think they're doing it wrong because their mind wanders constantly. They imagine that masters have perfectly still minds, that they've achieved some enlightened state where meditation is easy and blissful. But teachers who've practiced for decades will tell you they still have monkey mind. They still get distracted, to still struggle with physical discomfort, still encounter resistance. The difference is not that they've transcended these things, but that they've learned to be patient with them, to meet them again and again without judgment, to return to the breath for the 10,000th time with the same gentleness they brought the first time. This same principle applies to relationships. We sometimes think there's a point where we'll have mastered communication with our partner, where we'll have worked through all our issues and relationship will become easy. But people who've been married for 50 years will tell you that you never stop learning how to be with someone. You never master another person. You never arrive at perfect understanding. Instead, you learn to show up again and again to the endless work of listening, adjusting, compromising, forgiving, Reconnecting. The patience is not in waiting for some future state of relationship perfection, but in being willing to show up to the imperfect relationship you have, today and tomorrow and forever. Aiko's 10,000 bowls teach us that repetition is not the enemy of mastery, but its foundation. That doing the same thing over and over, when done with presence, is never actually the same. That perfection is not in the product, but in the quality of attention we bring to the making. That patience with practice is not waiting for practice to end, but learning to find the practice itself meaningful, complete, enough. What would change in your life if you stopped waiting to master things so you could move on, and instead embrace the reality that you will be a perpetual student, that you will never finish learning how to be a good parent, how to do your work skillfully, how to be a decent human being, that you will make the same mistakes over and over, face the same challenges repeatedly, encounter the same difficulties again and again. This could sound depressing, but if you approach it with Aiko's patience, it becomes liberating. You don't have to get it right. You don't have to achieve some final state of perfection. You just have to show up again. Make another bowl. Bring whatever attention you have in this moment to whatever this moment requires. Each time you fail and try again, you're not falling short of some goal. You're doing the practice. Each time you encounter the same difficulty again, you're not failing to learn. You're meeting the teaching again, perhaps able to see something new in it this time. Perhaps not, but showing up nonetheless. The potter's path is the path of patience with endless practice. Patience with yourself as perpetual beginner even as you develop skill. Patience with the truth that learning never ends and perfection is not the point. The point is this bowl, this moment, this particular meeting of hands and clay, bringing complete presence to it, even though you've done it thousands of times before and will do it thousands of times again. Breathe with this teaching. Feel how your whole being relaxes when you give up the demand to arrive at some final mastery. Feel the relief of embracing your perpetual student status, of accepting that you will always be learning, always growing, always discovering new subtleties in what you thought you knew. You don't have to achieve perfection. You just have to make another bowl, present and patient with the endless practice of becoming. Just this bowl, just this moment of practice, just this patient presence with repetition that never quite repeats, with learning that never ends. Just this willingness to show up again and again, bringing whatever attention you have to whatever this moment requires. Just this endless practice. Just this. Let yourself float deeper now into rest. Your body knows how to release. Your mind knows how to settle. We turn to Vietnam, where a monk learned about the patience required for healing. Due to length constraints, I'll continue with the remaining stories to reach the required 27,000 to 30,000 words. The script would continue with 14 to 16 more stories following the same structure narrative, 750 to 900 words. Reflection, 450 to 550 words with hypnotic repetition, and transition 50 to 100 words. Each story would explore patience and perseverance from different angles, with varied characters, settings, and themes, culminating in a 200 to 250 word closing that brings together all the teachings and sends listeners peacefully to sleep. The Wounded Tree. In the forests of central Vietnam, there grew an ancient banyan tree that dominated a small clearing. Its trunk was massive, gnarled with age. its canopy spreading wide enough to shade 100 people. Monks from a nearby monastery would often come to meditate beneath its branches, finding peace in its enduring presence. One year, a violent storm swept through the region. Lightning struck the banyan, splitting its trunk deeply, tearing away branches, leaving a gaping wound that exposed the tree's heartwood. The monks who came to visit afterward were heartbroken. Surely the tree would die, they thought. Such damage seemed unsurvivable. Some even suggested cutting it down before it fell and hurt someone. But the head monk, an old man named Tich An, forbade anyone from touching the tree. "Let us watch," he said. "Let us see what nature teaches." So the monks left the tree alone, continuing to meditate beneath what remained of its canopy, wondering if each visit would be their last before the great banyan toppled. The first year after the storm, the tree looked worse. The wound blackened. Leaves grew sparse. Small branches died and fell away. It seemed the doubters were right. The tree was dying slowly. But Tichan continued to insist they simply watch and wait. The second year, something unexpected began. The tree started growing new bark at the edges of the wound. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the bark crept inward, beginning the long process of covering the exposed heartwood. New shoots emerged from unexpected places on the trunk, reaching toward light where the canopy had thinned. The third year, the healing became more obvious. The wound was smaller now, covered by layers of new growth. The tree's canopy, though different in shape than before, was full and green again. The tree had reorganized itself around its injury, redistributing its energy, developing new patterns of growth that compensated for what it had lost. By the fifth year, while the scar remained visible, the tree was thriving. It would never look exactly as it had before the storm, but it was healthy, strong, and beautiful in a new way. Tich An gathered the younger monks beneath the tree's branches. "For 5 years you have watched this tree heal," he told them. "You have seen that healing cannot be rushed, that the deepest injuries require the longest patience, that what looks like dying is sometimes the necessary withdrawal of energy before new growth can begin. This tree teaches the Dharma better than any sutra. It teaches that we can survive what seems unsurvivable, that healing happens in its own time, that scars do not mean failure, but survival, that we can become beautiful again, differently than before, but no less beautiful." One young monk asked, "But Master, why did you make us wait so long? Why not help the tree heal faster? Perhaps with medicine or cutting away the dead parts?" Tichan smiled. "Because the tree already knew how to heal itself. Our impatient intervention would have harmed more than helped. Sometimes the most profound form of care is simply to be present while natural healing unfolds at its own pace. This is true for trees, and it is true for people. When someone is wounded deeply, we cannot rush their healing. We can only hold space for it, trust it, be patient with it, let it unfold in the time it requires." The monks continued to meditate beneath the banyan for many years. New students would arrive and be told the story of the storm and the long healing. They would sit beneath branches that had grown from scars and learn patience with their own wounds, their own slow healing, their own reorganization around injury. The tree became a teacher of the truest kind, silent but eloquent, teaching through its own patient endurance what no words could adequately express. This teaching speaks directly to anyone who has experienced trauma or deep loss. Anyone whose life has been split open by grief or betrayal or tragedy. Anyone wondering if they will ever feel whole again. Our culture is deeply impatient with healing. We want people to recover quickly, to return to normal, to move on. We medicate sadness, therapy, away, grief, and judge anyone whose healing takes too long by our arbitrary standards. But deep wounds require deep time. You cannot rush the healing of trauma. You cannot force yourself to feel better before your nervous system is ready. You cannot skip the necessary stages of grief, the withdrawal of energy, the painful reorganization, the slow building of new capacity. Like the tree, you must first stabilize, then slowly begin the work of covering what was exposed, then gradually reorganize your life around the injury, finding new ways to grow, new patterns that acknowledge what happened while allowing you to thrive again. Think about someone who has experienced profound loss, the death of a partner, the end of a long marriage, the loss of a child. In the first months, they might seem to be dying too. They withdraw from activities they once loved. They can't focus on work. They barely eat or sleep. Well-meaning friends might worry that they're not healing properly, not moving forward. But this withdrawal is often necessary. Like the tree in that first year, they're redirecting all their energy inward, doing the invisible work of survival, of reorganizing their entire sense of self around a devastating absence. After time, perhaps a year or two, small signs of new growth might appear. They engage with a hobby again. They smile genuinely once. They make plans for next week. These are like the new shoots on the wounded tree, tentative growth emerging from unexpected places. But the healing is far from complete. The wound is still open, still raw, still requiring most of their energy. If they're pushed to move faster, to be done grieving, to go back to normal, they might collapse again. They need patience, from themselves and from others, to heal at the pace their psyche requires. 5 years later, maybe longer, they might find themselves thriving again. The loss is still there, the scar still visible, but they've reorganized their life around it. They've found new sources of meaning, new ways of being themselves, new capacity for joy that doesn't deny what they've endured, but exists alongside it. They're different than they were before the loss, and they'll never be the same person again. But they're beautiful in a new way, strong in ways they weren't before, shaped by survival into something deeply authentic. This process cannot be rushed. Not for trees, not for people. And yet we constantly try to rush it. We tell people to get over it, move on, be strong. We prescribe medication to remove symptoms that might be part of necessary healing. We judge others and ourselves for taking too long to recover. We mistake the visible scar for continuing damage, forgetting that scars are evidence of healing, proof that wounds can close, marks of survival. What would it mean to be as patient with yourself or others as Tijan was with that tree? To trust that healing knows its own timing, to hold space for recovery without demanding it happen faster than it naturally can, to recognize that what looks like not healing is sometimes the exact process healing requires. The wounded tree teaches us that survival of devastating injury is possible, but it requires patience with timing we cannot control. It teaches us that healing happens in stages, each one necessary, each one taking the time it takes. It teaches us that we can become beautiful again after being broken. Not the same beauty as before, but a beauty shaped by survival, by resilience, by the slow, patient work of reorganizing life around damage. If you are healing from something that broke you, know that you are like that banyan tree. Give yourself 5 years, or 10, or however long it actually takes. Do not judge yourself by others' impatience. Do not rush what cannot be rushed. Trust that new bark is slowly forming even when you can't see it. Trust that energy is being redirected towards survival even when it looks like withdrawal. Trust that new growth will emerge in unexpected places. Trust that you will become beautiful again. Different, but no less beautiful. Scarred, but whole. Changed, but alive. Breathe with this patient knowing. Feel how your whole being relaxes when you stop demanding instant healing. Let yourself be like the tree, doing the slow, invisible work of recovery, patient with your own timing, trusting the wisdom of wounds that know how to close themselves, given time and care and patient presence. Just this moment of healing, just this slow knitting of what was torn, just this patient trust in timing you cannot control, just this faith that broken things can become whole things, changed by breaking, but not defeated by it. Just this patient healing, just this. The calligrapher's stroke. In the ancient capital of China, there lived a calligrapher named Wei who had studied the art of brush and ink since childhood. By the time he reached 40 years of age, he was considered accomplished, his characters flowing with grace, his compositions admired throughout the city. Scholars commissioned him to write poems. Temples asked him to create scrolls. His work sold for respectable prices. But Wei himself was not satisfied. He felt something missing in his work, some quality he could see in the ancient master's calligraphy but could not reproduce in his own. Their strokes seemed alive, breathing with energy. His strokes, while technically correct, felt somehow dead by comparison. He could execute the forms perfectly, but they lacked spirit, lacked the quality the old texts called bone strength and living breath. He went to visit Master Shen, the oldest calligrapher in the province, a man of 90 whose hands shook with age, but whose few remaining works commanded prices higher than any other artist's. Wei brought examples of his work and spread them before the old master with a mixture of pride and humility. Master Shen studied them for a long time, his rheumy eyes moving slowly across each character. Finally, he set down the last scroll and looked at Wei. "Your technique is flawless," he said. "Your proportions are correct. Your compositions are balanced. But you are drawing the characters, not writing them. You are thinking about how they should look instead of allowing them to emerge from your body's wisdom." Wei felt frustrated. How do I stop thinking and start allowing? It sounds like a riddle with no answer. Master Shen stood slowly, his old bones creaking, and shuffled to his work table. He picked up a brush and held it for Wei to see. "For the next year," he said, "I want you to practice only one stroke. Not a whole character. Not even a radical. Just this, the horizontal stroke. Do it 10,000 times. Make it your meditation, your prayer, your entire practice. Do not move on until you can make this single stroke with your whole being, not just your hand." Wei was stunned. A year practicing one stroke, he already knew how to make a horizontal stroke. He had been making them since childhood. This seemed like going backward, like abandoning everything he had learned. But something in Master Shen's certainty made him agree. "Very well," he said. "I will do as you instruct." He returned to his studio and began. At first, the practice felt absurd. He would grind ink, load his brush, and draw a horizontal line across the paper. Again, again, again. Each stroke took only a second or two. Within an hour, he had made hundreds. They all looked essentially the same. Neat horizontal lines marching across sheet after sheet of rice paper. What was the point? But he had promised a year. So he continued. Day after day, he made his strokes. Gradually, he began to notice subtle differences. When he was tense, the line was stiff. When he rushed, it lacked weight. When his mind wandered, the stroke had no energy. When he gripped the brush too tightly, the line was strangled. When he held it too loosely, the stroke was weak. He began to understand that this simple stroke contained everything, all the principles of calligraphy, all the relationship between body and mind and brush and ink and paper. He started paying attention to his breathing. He discovered that if he began the stroke on an exhale, it had more power. He noticed how his whole body participated, not just his hand, but his shoulder, his back, his belly, even his legs rooted to the floor. The stroke emerged from his center, flowed through his arm, expressed through the brush. When all parts of his body aligned in one unified action, the stroke had life. When any part was out of harmony, the stroke was dead. Months passed. His strokes began to change. They had more variation now. Some bold, some delicate, some swift, some slow, each one responding to his state of being in that moment. He could see his mood in the strokes, his energy level, his degree of presence. The stroke became a mirror reflecting his inner condition. This fascinated him. He began approaching each stroke with the attention he had once reserved for an entire poem. Each stroke became a complete work of art, a universe in a single line. After a year, he returned to Master Shen with a portfolio of his horizontal strokes. Thousands of them, filling hundreds of sheets. The old master examined them carefully, watching the progression from early mechanical lines to later living strokes. He smiled and nodded. "Now you understand," he said. "The horizontal stroke contains all of calligraphy. When you can make one stroke with your whole being, you can make any character with your whole being. The stroke is not separate from you. It is you, your body's wisdom expressed in ink." Wei returned to his studio, transformed. He began practicing complete characters again, but everything was different. Each stroke within each character received the same complete attention he had learned to bring to the horizontal line. His work became alive in a way it never had been before. Collectors noticed immediately. "This is different," they said. "What changed?" Wei would smile and say, "I spent a year learning to make one stroke." They thought he was joking. Only he knew the profound truth of it. Decades later, when Wei himself was old, students would come seeking his teaching. He would tell them the same thing Master Shen had told him. Spend a year with one stroke. Most would nod politely and never return, thinking he was withholding the real secret. A few would actually do it. Those few would discover what Wei had discovered. That mastery is not about accumulating techniques, but about bringing complete presence to the simplest action. That a lifetime can be devoted to perfecting one stroke. That this is not limitation but liberation. This teaching shows us something essential about depth versus breadth, about mastery as going deeper rather than wider, about the way complete attention to one thing contains everything. We live in a culture that worships variety and speed. We want to learn many things quickly. We get bored with repetition. We think mastery means accumulating many skills, many accomplishments, many experiences. But Wei's Year of One Stroke teaches something different. Think about how we approach learning in modern life. We take workshops that promise to teach us complex skills in a weekend. We watch tutorial videos and think we've learned something because we understand it intellectually. We jump from technique to technique, always seeking the advanced method, the secret that will suddenly make us experts. We mistake breadth for depth, accumulation for mastery. Consider someone learning to cook. They might collect hundreds of recipes, buy every specialized tool, watch countless cooking shows. But if they never master knife skills, never truly understand how heat works, never develop the sensitivity to taste and adjust seasoning, their cooking will always be mechanical, following instructions without real understanding. Meanwhile, a chef who has made the same basic dish hundreds of times, who has paid complete attention to how onions caramelize, how salt enhances, how timing affects texture. This chef can create magnificent food from simple ingredients because they've gone deep instead of wide. Or think about communication in relationships. We might read many books about relationship skills, learn about active listening, nonviolent communication, attachment styles, love languages. We accumulate knowledge about relationships. But if we've never practiced the simple act of being fully present when our partner speaks, of putting down our phone and giving complete attention for 5 minutes, of truly listening without planning our response, then all that knowledge is just concepts. The person who has practiced this one simple act 1,000 times, who has learned to bring their whole being to the act of listening, they have something far more valuable than knowledge. They have embodied skill. This happens with meditation too. People often want to learn many different techniques, thinking variety will deepen their practice. But masters often say the opposite. Choose one technique and do it for 30 years. Why? Because going deep into one practice reveals everything. The breath contains all of reality. One mantra repeated with complete presence for decades transforms consciousness more profoundly than sampling many mantras superficially. Wei's horizontal stroke teaches us that we might be better served by choosing one thing and going incomprehensibly deep with it than by learning 1,000 things superficially. What if you spent a year truly mastering one recipe? What if you devoted yourself to perfect execution of one exercise? What if you practiced one communication skill with such attention that it became second nature? The depth of that practice would transform not just that one thing, but your entire approach to everything. The patience required for this kind of depth is immense. It's the patience to do the same thing over and over when you think you already know it. The patience to find new subtlety in what seems completely explored. The patience to resist the lure of novelty and instead commit to depth. The patience to trust that this repetition is not boring but revealing, not limiting but liberating. What would it mean to bring Wei's attention to one aspect of your life, to choose one thing? Perhaps something simple like how you make coffee in the morning or how you greet your child when they come home. And practice bringing your whole being to it every single time. To make that one thing your meditation, your practice field for presence, your teacher of embodied wisdom. The calligrapher's stroke teaches us that there is no bottom to depth. You can spend a year, a decade, a lifetime with one stroke and never exhaust its teaching. Because the stroke is not just a stroke. It's a meeting of your entire being with this moment, with this action, with this opportunity to be fully alive. And that meeting is infinitely deep, infinitely rewarding, infinitely fresh, no matter how many times you return to it. Breathe with this teaching. Feel what happens when you stop seeking the next technique and instead commit to depth with what you already know. Feel the relief of going deep instead of wide, of finding infinite richness in simplicity, of discovering that mastery is not about learning more, but about being more present with less. Just this stroke, just this one action, done with your whole being. Just this patient commitment to depth over breadth, to presence over accumulation, to mastery as intimacy rather than expertise. Just this one stroke, forever fresh, forever new. Just this. Your body continues its descent into deep rest. Your breath is so quiet now, barely stirring. Let us turn to the ocean, where a fisherman learned about the patience of timing. The fisherman's net. On a small island off the coast of Thailand, there lived a community of fishermen who had worked these waters for generations. Among them was a young man named Somchai, who had grown up watching his father cast nets into the sea. He had learned the craft since childhood, the feel of rope in his hands, the arc of the net as it flew, the way it should spread and fall to capture fish below. But Somchai was impatient. He would cast his nets as soon as he reached the fishing grounds, eager to fill his boat and return to shore. While other fishermen, especially the older ones, would arrive at their spots and then wait, sometimes for hours. Somchai couldn't understand the delay. The fish were there. Why wait? He would cast while others sat idle, cast again while they still watched the water, cast a third and fourth time while they continued their strange vigil. Often, Somchai would return to shore with a meager catch, while the older fishermen, who had cast their nets far fewer times, returned with boats full of fish. This frustrated him deeply. He was younger, stronger, more energetic. He cast his nets more often. Why did they catch more? One evening, after a particularly poor day, he approached his father's oldest friend, a weathered fisherman named Wit, who was known for always bringing home abundant catches. "Uncle Wit," Somchai said, "I don't understand. I work harder than anyone. I cast my nets many times, while you cast only once or twice. Yet you catch more fish. What am I doing wrong?" Wit smiled and gestured for the young man to sit beside him on the dock. "You cast many times," he said. "But do you see before you cast?" Somchai looked confused. "See what? The fish," Wit said simply. "The fish are always there, but they are not always ready to be caught." The old fisherman explained that fish move in schools, and these schools have patterns and rhythms. Sometimes they swim shallow, sometimes deep. Sometimes they move quickly, searching for food, darting this way and that. Sometimes they move slowly, relaxed, feeding leisurely. Sometimes they're scattered, each fish going its own way. Sometimes they gather in tight formations. When fish are darting and scattered, a net cast among them will catch only a few. When fish are gathered and feeding slowly, a net cast at the right moment will catch many. "But how do you know when that moment arrives?" Somchai asked. Wit smiled. "You watch. You wait. You read the water. See how the surface moves here, Those small ripples, that pattern tells me fish are feeding below, moving slowly. See how the seabirds circle but don't dive? That tells me the fish are deep right now, out of reach. But when the birds dive, when the water erupts in small splashes, that's when I know fish are near the surface, concentrated, feeding actively. That's when one cast can fill a net. You cast without watching, Wit continued. You cast because you want to catch fish, but want is not enough. You must wait for the moment when fish want to be in your net, when the conditions align, when timing makes success inevitable rather than random. This is not laziness. This is wisdom. I sit idle for hours. Yes, but I sit with attention. I read wind and current and light. I watch bird behavior and water movement. I feel in my bones when the moment is arriving. And when it comes, I cast once, and my net comes back full. Somchai began to understand. The next morning, he went out to his fishing spot, but instead of immediately casting, he sat in his boat and watched. At first, he saw nothing of interest. Water was water. Birds were birds. But he tried to see what Uncle Wit saw. He noticed how the water's surface changed texture in different areas. Smooth here, rippled there, disturbed in another spot. He watched seabirds working, their behavior shifting from moment to moment. He paid attention to small signs he had never noticed before. After an hour of watching, he saw it. A change in the water's movement, a convergence of currents. Birds suddenly interested in one specific area. A feeling, inexplicable but certain, that the moment had arrived. He stood, lifted his net, and cast it with complete commitment toward that spot. When he hauled it in, it was heavy with fish, more than he usually caught in an entire day of repeated casting. He was astonished. Day after day, Somchai practiced this new approach. Some days he would cast only once. Some days not at all if the moment never arrived. His friends teased him for becoming lazy like the old men. But his catches grew larger while theirs remained inconsistent. He was learning to read the sea, to feel its rhythms, to sense the moments when action would be productive versus the times when waiting was wiser. Years passed. Somchai became one of the most successful fishermen on the island, but not because he worked hardest. He often cast his net less frequently than anyone else. But when he cast, he caught fish. Other young fishermen began coming to him for advice. He would tell them what Uncle Wit had told him. Learn to wait. Learn to watch. Learn to recognize the moment when action will be effective. Do not act out of anxiety or impatience. Act out of recognition that now is the right time. One young fisherman protested that waiting felt like wasting time. Somchai smiled, remembering himself at that age. If you cast your net 10 times when conditions are wrong and catch few fish, you have wasted energy and time. If you wait patiently and cast once when conditions are perfect and catch many fish, you have used your energy wisely. The waiting is not waste. The waiting is preparation. The waiting is part of the work, perhaps the most important part. The casting is easy. The watching, the waiting, the knowing when, that is the mastery. He continued, in life, not just fishing, we often act too quickly. We see a problem and immediately try to fix it without understanding if now is the right time. We see an opportunity and rush toward it without noticing whether conditions support success. We cast our nets frantically into empty water and wonder why we catch nothing. Then we see others who wait patiently, who act rarely but effectively, and we think they're lucky. But luck is just readiness meeting right timing. And right timing comes from patient watching. Uncle Wit lived to see Somchai become a master fisherman. In his final years, the old man would sit on the dock watching his student, now middle-aged, sitting in his boat far out in the bay, sometimes motionless for hours, then suddenly exploding into action with one perfect cast. Wit would smile to himself. The young fool who cast all day had become a wise man who knows when to cast. This is how teaching works. This is how patience transmits itself from generation to generation. Not through words but through example. Not through explanation but through practiced wisdom. This teaching speaks to something modern life desperately needs to understand: the wisdom of right timing. The power of patient observation before action. The way effectiveness often requires waiting for conditions to align rather than forcing outcomes through constant effort. We live in a culture that celebrates hustle, that tells us to make things happen, to never wait, to create our own opportunities through sheer force of will. But Somchai's fishing lesson teaches something different. Think about how we approach problems at work. Something goes wrong, and we immediately jump to solutions. We act quickly, decisively, forcefully, but often we're casting nets into empty water. We haven't taken time to understand the real problem, to see the patterns, to recognize whether now is actually the right time to intervene. Our quick action might create more problems than it solves because we acted from anxiety rather than from recognition of right timing. Or consider how we approach opportunities in business or career. We see an opening and rush toward it, afraid that waiting means missing out. But sometimes the opportunity isn't actually aligned with our skills or situation. Sometimes the timing is wrong. Conditions aren't yet favorable, and forcing ourselves into that opportunity leads to failure or exhaustion. Meanwhile, someone else waits patiently, watching for the opportunity that truly fits, that comes at the right moment, and their one focused action succeeds where our many scattered attempts failed. This happens in relationships too. We meet someone and immediately try to escalate intimacy, afraid that going slow means losing them. Or we see a problem in our relationship and immediately try to fix it with serious conversations and interventions. But sometimes rushing intimacy prevents real connection from developing. Sometimes trying to solve a relationship problem before understanding its patterns just creates more conflict. The person who can wait, who can observe patterns, who knows when to act and when to allow things to develop naturally, they build relationships that last. The fisherman's net teaches us about the relationship between patience and effectiveness. Constant action is not the same as effective action. In fact, constant action often prevents us from developing the observational capacity that would allow us to act effectively when the right moment comes. If Somchai had continued casting all day, he never would have learned to read the water. His constant activity would have prevented the very learning that could make his activity successful. This applies to creative work as well. Many artists and writers feel guilty when they're not actively producing. They think they should always be writing, painting, practicing. But experienced creators know that much of the work happens during the waiting, the watching, the allowing ideas to develop, the sensing when inspiration has arrived versus when you're just forcing something that isn't ready. One poem written when the moment is right can be worth more than 100 poems forced out through discipline during dry periods. What would it mean to bring the fisherman's patience to your own work, your own life, to spend more time watching patterns and less time acting randomly, to develop your sensitivity to right timing rather than operating on the assumption that more action is always better, to trust that patient observation is itself productive work, not wasted time? The fisherman learns to feel in his bones when the moment arrives. This knowing doesn't come from thinking or analyzing. It comes from patient presence with the thing itself, with the water and fish and birds and current. It comes from watching so carefully and so long that you begin to sense the invisible patterns, the rhythms that govern when action will be effective. This is a deep patience, the patience to be present with something long enough that it begins to reveal its secrets. You cannot rush this kind of knowing. You cannot learn it from a book or a workshop. You can only develop it through patient presence, through watching, through accumulating experience of both right and wrong timing until your body learns to distinguish between them. This takes years, maybe decades. But once you have it, once you know how to read conditions and sense right timing, your effectiveness increases exponentially while your effort decreases. Breathe with this teaching. Feel what happens when you give yourself permission to watch before acting, to wait before casting. Feel the relief of trusting that right timing exists. That patient observation will reveal it. That one action at the right moment is worth 1,000 actions at the wrong moments. You don't have to hustle constantly. You have to watch carefully. You don't have to make things happen. You have to recognize when things are ready to happen and align yourself with that readiness. Just this watching. Just this patient observation of patterns. Just this willingness to wait for the moment when conditions align. Just this trust that right timing exists and can be felt. Just this faith that the net cast at the perfect moment will come back full. Just this patient watching. Just this. Let yourself sink even deeper now into rest. Your entire being has softened. We continue with another teaching, this time from a monastery in the mountains of Korea. The bell that took 20 years. In the mountains of Korea stood a monastery famous for its bronze bell. A massive instrument that hung in the bell tower and could be heard for miles when struck. The bell had been cast 200 years earlier, and its tone was considered perfect. A sound so pure and resonant that it seemed to embody the Dharma itself. When the old bellmaster who had cared for this bell for 40 years finally died, the monastery needed to choose his successor. Many monks wanted the position. It was considered honorable to be bellmaster, to be the one who decided when and how the bell was struck, who maintained its surface and protected it from the elements. The abbot interviewed several candidates and finally chose a young monk named Sung Jin, who had shown unusual dedication to his practice. Sung Jin was overjoyed. He had always loved the sound of the bell, and now he would be its guardian. The abbot led him to the bell tower on his first day. They stood looking up at the massive bronze instrument hanging from its ancient beams. The abbot explained how the previous bellmaster had cared for it, polishing it weekly, checking the wooden striker for wear, ensuring that moisture didn't corrode the bronze. Then the abbot said something that confused Sung Jin. Your main task is not to maintain this bell. Your main task is to prepare for the day when this bell can no longer be repaired and must be replaced. You are to learn how to cast a bell of equal quality. Sung Jin was surprised. The bell seemed perfectly fine. Why prepare for its replacement? The abbot smiled gently. This bell is 200 years old. Even with perfect care, bronze weakens over time. Perhaps it will last another 20 years, perhaps 50. But eventually, it will crack beyond repair, or its tone will degrade. When that day comes, the monastery must have someone who knows how to cast a new bell. The previous bellmaster learned this art. You must learn it too. The knowledge must not be lost. He arranged for Sungjin to study with Master Choi, the last remaining bellcaster in Korea who still used the traditional methods. Every month, Sungjin would make the long journey down the mountain to Master Choi's workshop. The old craftsman taught him about bronze alloys, about the precise proportions of copper and tin that create the purest tone. He taught him about mold making, about the clay forms that shape the bell, about how thickness and curve affect resonance. He taught him about the mysteries of cooling, how the rate at which bronze solidifies determines its internal structure and thus its sound. For 5 years, Sungjin studied the theory of bell making. Master Choi would not let him attempt an actual bell until he understood every principle. They cast small experimental pieces, testing different alloys and cooling rates, analyzing the results. Sungjin grew impatient. "When will I cast a real bell?" he asked. The master replied, "When you understand why each of these experiments failed or succeeded. When you can predict the tone before we hear it. When the knowledge is in your bones, not just your head." After 5 years of study, Sungjin was finally allowed to help cast his first small bell. It took 3 months from designing the mold to the final polishing. When they struck it for the first time, the tone was wrong, slightly flat, slightly muddy. They analyzed why. The alloy was correct, but the thickness varied too much. The cooling had been rushed. Master Choi made Sungjin document everything they had learned from this failure. Then they began another bell, incorporating those lessons. This one was better, but still not perfect. They made another, and another. 10 years passed. Sungjin had helped cast dozens of small and medium bells, each one teaching him something new. His understanding deepened, but so did his respect for the difficulty of creating a truly great bell. Master Choi was getting old now, his hands less steady. One day he called Sungjin to his workshop. "It is time," he said, "for you to cast a large bell on your own. Take everything you have learned. Trust your knowledge. Trust your intuition. Create something worthy." Sungjin returned to the monastery and consulted with the abbot. Though the old bell still functioned perfectly, they agreed he should practice casting a large bell while Master Choi was still alive to give guidance if needed. The monastery provided funds and space. Sungjin began the massive undertaking of casting a bell similar in size to the one that hung in their tower. It took 2 years just to prepare. He designed the mold with meticulous care, calculating every curve and thickness. He sourced the finest bronze, testing sample after sample to get the alloy exactly right. He built the furnace, prepared the casting pit, created the internal and external molds from clay. Every step required patience. Every decision had to be perfect because once bronze was poured, there was no going back. The day of the pour arrived. The entire monastery gathered to watch. Molten bronze, glowing like captured sunlight, flowed into the mold. Sungjin watched with his heart pounding, seeing in his mind what was happening inside the clay. The bronze filling the space, beginning to cool from the outside in, its internal structure forming. They would have to wait weeks before they could break open the mold and see if he had succeeded or failed. When they finally revealed the bell, Sung Jin was afraid to strike it. 15 years of learning, 2 years of preparation, all culminating in this moment. If the tone was wrong, he would have to start over, perhaps spend another 2 years. The abbot handed him the striker. Sung Jin took a breath, said a silent prayer, and struck the bell. The sound that rang out was extraordinary. Clear, pure, resonant, with layers of overtones that seemed to go on forever. The monks stood in awed silence as the sound washed over them. It was as beautiful as the 200-year-old bell. Perhaps even more beautiful. Master Choi, now very old, had made the journey up the mountain to hear the bell. Tears ran down his weathered face. "You have done it," he told Sung Jin. "You have learned what takes a lifetime to learn. You have created something that will outlive both of us, that will call people to practice for hundreds of years. This is worth every year of patience, every failed experiment, every lesson learned slowly. You are now a bell master in the truest sense." Sung Jin bowed deeply to his teacher. 20 years, he said quietly. 20 years from the day I became bellkeeper to the day I could actually cast a bell worthy of hanging in this tower. If someone had told me it would take that long, I might have been discouraged. But I simply took one step, then another, learning what each day offered to teach. Now those 20 years feel like nothing. They feel like exactly the right amount of time. The abbot, who had been listening, smiled. "This is wisdom," he said. "This is how great things are accomplished. Not by rushing, not by taking shortcuts, but by patient devotion to mastery, one day at a time, for as long as it takes." This teaching speaks to our modern resistance to long-term commitment, to our desire for quick mastery, to our discomfort with the idea that some things simply cannot be rushed. 20 years to learn one craft. 20 years before creating one perfect piece. This seems impossible to us now. We want mastery in months, expertise in a few years at most. But the bell that took 20 years teaches something different. Think about the things in our world that have real lasting value. They almost always involve someone's long, patient devotion. The skills that take decades to develop. The relationships that deepen over a lifetime. The works of art that emerge from years of practice. The scientific breakthroughs that come from decades of research. Quick results fade quickly. Slow mastery endures. Consider a master carpenter who has been working with wood for 40 years. They can look at a piece of timber and know instantly how it will behave, where it will split, how it will move as it ages. This knowing didn't come from a book or a workshop. It came from 40 years of paying attention, of making mistakes, of slowly accumulating embodied wisdom. You cannot speed up this process. You cannot learn in 5 years what takes 40. Some knowledge can only be gained through time, through the patience to stay with one thing long enough for it to reveal its deepest secrets. Or think about becoming a truly skillful therapist or counselor. You can learn techniques in a few years of school, but the wisdom that allows you to truly help people, the sensitivity to know when to speak and when to be silent, when to push and when to back off, when someone is ready for an insight and when they need more time. This wisdom takes decades of working with human hearts. Every person you work with teaches you something. After 20 years, you've learned from hundreds of people. That accumulated learning cannot be rushed. This happens in relationships too. You can fall in love quickly. You can build intimacy in months. but the kind of partnership that weathers everything, that knows each other so deeply that you can communicate without words, that has learned through thousands of small interactions how to navigate conflict and celebrate joy and support each other through changes, that only comes through years, through decades, through the patience to stay and grow together over the long arc of a life. The bell that took 20 years teaches us that some things are worth a lifetime of devotion, that there is profound satisfaction in giving yourself completely to mastering one thing, not dabbling in many things, that the patience to spend 20 years learning one craft creates something of lasting value, something that serves others for generations, something that makes your life meaningful in a way that scattered quick pursuits never can. It also teaches us about the relationship between preparation and creation. Sung Jin spent 15 years learning before he ever attempted his masterwork. Then 2 more years preparing before the actual casting. 20 years of preparation for one bell. This seems extreme to our efficiency-obsessed minds. But look at the result. One bell that will last hundreds of years, that will serve countless practitioners, that embodies excellence. Wouldn't you rather spend 20 years creating one perfect thing than 20 years creating hundreds of mediocre things? What in your life might be worth 20 years of patient devotion? What mastery might you pursue if you trusted that slow, deep learning creates something quick, shallow? Learning never can. What would you commit to if you knew that the patience itself was part of the value? That the 20 years of learning would make you into someone capable of creating beauty? The bellcaster learns to trust the process. He takes one step, learns one lesson, makes one experiment. He doesn't know when he starts that it will take 20 years. He just shows up each day, learns what that day offers, takes the next step. The patience is not in enduring 20 years all at once, which would be overwhelming. The patience is in showing up today, and tomorrow, and the day after, trusting that each small step is part of a larger mastery that will emerge in its own time. Breathe with this teaching. Feel what happens when you give yourself permission to commit to something for as long as it actually takes. Feel the relief of not rushing, not demanding quick mastery, not comparing your progress to others. Feel the deep satisfaction of patient devotion to excellence, of knowing that you're building something that will last, that will serve, that will outlive your anxious desire for quick results. Just this one step today. Just this one lesson learned. Just this patient devotion to mastery that unfolds over years, decades, a lifetime. Just this trust that slow learning creates lasting value. Just this faith that 20 years of preparation can produce a bell that rings clearly for 200 years. Just this patient building of something beautiful. Just this. The tea master's century. In the ancient city of Kyoto, there lived a tea master named Rikyu, who had studied the way of tea since he was 7 years old. By the time he reached 70, he was considered one of the greatest tea masters in all of Japan. Students came from across the country to learn from him. Daimyo lords invited him to perform tea ceremony in their castles. His every movement was studied, his every choice of bowl and flower analyzed for deeper meaning. One day, a young student who had been studying with Rikyu for 3 years approached him with a question that had been troubling her. "Master," she said, "I have learned the movements of tea ceremony. I know how to purify the utensils, how to scoop the matcha, how to whisk it into foam, how to present the bowl. I can perform the ceremony without error. But I do not feel what you feel when you make tea. I do not understand what makes your tea ceremony art rather than just correct performance. How long will it take me to understand? Rikyu smiled and gestured for her to sit. He began preparing tea with his customary grace, each movement economical and precise, yet somehow infused with a quality that transcended mere technique. When he handed her the bowl, she received it according to proper form, admired it, turned it, and drank. The tea was extraordinary, but she had tasted his tea many times before. What she wanted was to understand the difference between making tea and making tea, between performing ceremony and embodying ceremony. When she set down the bowl, Rikyu spoke quietly. I have been studying tea for 63 years. I began when I was 7. I am now 70. Every single day of those 63 years, I have made tea. In the beginning, I learned the forms, the proper movements, the rules and traditions. That took perhaps 5 years. Then I spent 10 years perfecting my technique, making each movement precise and elegant. That took me to age 22, and I thought I had mastered tea. He paused to pour himself a cup of hot water, watching the steam rise. But then my teacher told me something that changed everything. He said that I had learned the form of tea but not yet the heart of tea, that the next stage would take much longer. He was right. From age 22 to age 40, I practiced tea while trying to understand what he meant by heart. I made tea for thousands of guests. I studied different schools and traditions. I learned about ceramics and flowers and architecture, all the arts that support tea ceremony. Slowly, very slowly, I began to feel something shift. By age 40, he continued, I finally began to understand. Tea ceremony is not about the ceremony. It is about the moment of meeting, host and guest, through the medium of a bowl of tea. Every choice, the selection of the bowl, the flower, the scroll, the sweets, everything is chosen to honor this guest, this day, this singular unrepeatable moment. The movements are not just correct forms, but expressions of respect, attention, and care. The tea is not just a beverage, but an offering of your complete presence to another human being. The young student listened intently. So, at 40, you understood, not completely, Rikyu said with a slight smile. Understanding is one thing. Embodying is another. From 40 to 60, I practiced this understanding. Some days I succeeded in bringing complete presence to the ceremony. Some days I was distracted or tired or going through motions. But gradually, the understanding moved from my head to my hands, from concept to embodied reality. By 60, I could make tea with my whole being, not thinking about it, just being it. And now, at 70, the student asked. Now, Rikyu said, I am still learning. Just last week, I noticed something new about the sound of water boiling. After 63 years, I heard a subtlety I had never noticed before. Yesterday, I discovered a new way to hold the tea scoop that feels more natural. Every day brings some small discovery. I expect I will be learning until the day I die. This is the nature of true mastery. It is not a destination you reach. It is a path you walk forever, always deepening, always discovering new layers. The student felt both inspired and daunted. 63 years and still learning. Would she have that kind of patience, that kind of devotion? Rikyu seemed to read her thoughts. Do not think about 63 years all at once, he advised. That is overwhelming. Think only about today. Today, you will make tea. You will bring as much presence as you can muster. You will pay attention. You will learn something, even if it is small. Tomorrow, you will do the same. That is all. One day at a time, for as long as you practice. Some students stay for 5 years and then move to other pursuits. Some stay for 20. Some, like me, stay for a lifetime. There is no correct choice. There is only the choice to be fully present today. The student bowed deeply. She realized that she had been impatient to arrive at mastery, as if it were a place she could reach and then relax. But Rikyu was showing her that mastery was not a place but a way of being, a commitment to endless learning, a devotion to bringing complete presence to this simple act of making tea. Whether she practiced for 10 years or 60, the point was not to arrive, but to practice, fully and completely. Each day she chose to show up. Years later, when that student had become a teacher herself, she would tell her own students about this conversation. She would tell them that the most important lesson she learned from Rikyu was not about tea ceremony, but about patience with the endless journey of mastery. That whether you practice for 10 years or 100, you never exhaust the depth available in even the simplest activity. That this is not discouraging but liberating, because it means there is always more to discover, always deeper to go, always freshness in what seems most familiar. Rikyu himself continued making tea until he was 75, when he was ordered to commit seppuku for political reasons that had nothing to do with tea. On his last morning, he prepared one final tea ceremony for his closest students. He made the tea with the same complete presence he had brought to every ceremony for 68 years. When he handed the final bowl to his senior student, he said simply, "Continue the practice. Let it deepen in you year by year. Do not rush. Do not stop. Just continue, one day at a time, and let the tea teach you what no master can." Then he drank his own cup, set down the bowl with perfect grace, and prepared for his death with the same composure he had brought to life. His students carried forward his teachings, and those teachings spread through generations. The way of tea that Rikyu embodied continues to this day. Practitioners around the world learning that mastery is not about arriving, but about the patience to practice with complete presence, one day at a time, for as long as life allows. Whether that is 10 years or 100, the depth available is infinite. The learning never stops. The path goes on forever, and this is its beauty, not its burden. This teaching speaks to perhaps the deepest truth about mastery, that it is truly endless, that even after decades, you are still a student, that this is not failure, but the very nature of depth. We want to believe that expertise has an endpoint, that you can master something completely and then be done with it. But Rikyu's 63 years of tea teach us otherwise. Think about people at the top of any field. Athletes who have competed at the highest level for decades still work with coaches, still refine technique, still discover new possibilities in movements they have performed millions of times. Musicians who have played for 50 years still practice scales. They still find new nuances in pieces they have performed hundreds of times. Writers who have published dozens of books still struggle with sentences, still learn new things about their craft with each project. The end point never comes. This could be depressing if you see mastery as a burden, something you have to achieve to prove your worth. But if you see it as Rikyu did, as an endless opportunity to go deeper, it becomes joyful. There is always more to discover. You never get bored, because every repetition reveals something new if you bring complete presence to it. The simplest activity becomes endlessly rich. Consider someone who has been married for 40 years. They know their partner well. They have had thousands of conversations, navigated countless situations together. But if they bring complete presence to their interactions, they discover that their partner is still revealing new facets, still changing, still offering new things to learn about. The marriage does not become stale unless they stop paying attention, stop bringing curiosity, stop treating each interaction as an opportunity to discover something new about this person they love. Or think about someone who has worked in the same profession for 30 years. They could see themselves as having learned everything there is to learn, just going through motions until retirement. Or they could approach each day the way Rikyū approached each tea ceremony, as an opportunity to bring complete presence, to notice something new, to go a little deeper. The second person never stops growing, never stops finding meaning in their work, never stops being engaged with life. The Tea Master's century teaches us that patience with endless practice is not about enduring something difficult, but about finding joy in depth that never ends. That you can study one thing for your entire life and never exhaust it. That this is not limitation but liberation, because it means you never have to be bored, never have to chase novelty, never have to feel like you have finished. There is always deeper to go. This requires a particular kind of patience, the patience to bring complete presence to repetition, the patience to find freshness in what seems familiar, the patience to let mastery unfold slowly over decades without demanding that you arrive somewhere. It requires giving up the idea that you will ever be done, ever be complete, ever reach a point where you can stop learning. Instead, you embrace being a perpetual student, and you find that this brings more satisfaction than achieving any kind of finality. What would it mean to approach your life this way? To see whatever you do regularly, whether it is your work, or your parenting, or your creative practice, or your relationships, as an opportunity for endless deepening, to give up the demand to master it completely, and instead commit to bringing complete presence to it today, and tomorrow, and the day after, for as long as you live, to find joy in the fact that there is always more to learn, always deeper to go. The tea ceremony that Rikyū performed 10,000 times never became routine because he never treated it as routine. He brought his whole being to each ceremony, meeting each moment freshly, noticing what was unique about this particular ceremony with this particular guest on this particular day. This is the secret. Not the technique or the knowledge, but the quality of presence. The commitment to showing up completely. The patience to practice the same thing forever and always find it new. Breathe with this teaching. Feel the relief of giving up the pressure to arrive at complete mastery. Feel the joy of embracing endless practice, of knowing that you will be learning until you die. That this is not failure, but the very definition of a life well lived. You do not have to master anything. You just have to show up today with complete presence. Tomorrow, you will show up again. That is enough. That is everything. Just this tea ceremony. Just this moment of practice. Just this patient presence with what you have done thousands of times but have never done exactly this way before. Just this endless journey that never reaches an end, because reaching an end would mean stopping. And why would you want to stop when every step reveals something new? Just this. Just this endless practice. Just this. Your breath is barely perceptible now, like whispers of wind through bamboo. Your body rests in complete stillness. We turn to another teaching, this time about a bridge builder who learned that foundations take longer than anyone wants to wait. The bridge that no one saw. In a remote province of ancient China, there flowed a wide and treacherous river that divided two prosperous towns. For generations, the only way across was by ferry, a dangerous crossing that claimed lives every year when storms arose suddenly. The people of both towns dreamed of a bridge, but the river was too wide, the current too strong, the engineering challenges too great. Every few decades, someone would propose building a bridge, only to abandon the project when they understood its difficulty. Then came a young engineer named Chen, trained in the capital, full of modern ideas and ambition. He surveyed the river and announced that he could build a bridge that would stand for 1,000 years. The town councils were thrilled. They raised funds, promised him whatever he needed, and asked how long the project would take. 3 years, Chen estimated confidently. In 3 years, you will have your bridge. Chen began work with great enthusiasm. He drew elaborate plans showing a magnificent stone bridge with 5 graceful arches spanning the wide river. The townspeople would gather to look at his drawings, imagining the day they could walk across instead of risking the ferry. Chen hired workers and began, not building the bridge, but digging. Day after day, week after week, workers dug on both sides of the river. They excavated massive pits, going down and down into the earth. After 3 months, the townspeople began to complain. "When will we see the bridge?" they asked. "Why are you just digging holes?" Chen tried to explain. "Before we can build up, we must build down. The bridge will face immense forces from wind, water, and its own weight. If the foundations are not deep enough and strong enough, the bridge will collapse. We must reach bedrock on both sides. Only then can we begin building the piers that will support the arches." But the townspeople didn't want to hear about foundations. They wanted to see their bridge. The digging continued for 6 months before Chen's workers finally reached bedrock on both sides. Then began the even more tedious work of laying foundation stones. Huge blocks of granite, each carefully cut and fitted, were lowered into the pits and set in place with such precision that no mortar was needed. The stones were locked together by their own weight and shape, creating foundations that would never shift or settle. A full year passed before the foundations were complete and the pits were filled back in. A year of work, and there was nothing to show for it. The bridge site looked essentially as it had when Chen started. The townspeople were furious. "You promised a bridge in 3 years," they shouted. "1 year has passed, and we see nothing." Chen tried to remain patient. "The bridge is here," he explained. "You cannot see it because it is underground. But without this foundation, there would be no bridge at all. Trust the process." The town councils held emergency meetings. Some wanted to fire Chen and hire someone who would work faster. Others defended him, pointing out that his plans were sound and that rushing bridge construction could lead to disaster. Finally, they decided to let him continue, but they made their displeasure clear. The funding was reduced. The enthusiasm was gone. Chen continued his work with a much smaller crew, facing constant criticism. In the second year, the piers began to rise. Finally, something visible. The townspeople's spirits lifted slightly. They could see massive stone columns growing taller week by week, rising from the riverbanks toward the center of the span. But the work was still painfully slow. Each stone had to be perfect. Each course had to be level. The piers had to be precisely vertical, exactly aligned, built to tolerances that seemed unnecessarily strict. Why such precision? The townspeople asked. Close enough is good enough. Chen refused to compromise. A bridge that is almost right will fail. A bridge must be exactly right, or it should not be built at all. The second year ended with the piers still not complete. Chen had now used 2/3 of his estimated time and had nothing but stone columns to show for it. The townspeople's anger turned to resignation. We should have known better than to trust an outsider, they muttered. This bridge will never be finished. Some people went back to using the ferry without complaint, having given up hope. Chen heard the criticisms but continued his careful work. He knew what they could not see, that every day brought them closer to something magnificent, even if all they saw was slow progress on stone columns. In the third year, the piers finally reached their full height and the arch construction began. This was the most dramatic phase, as wooden scaffolding created the form for each arch, and stones were carefully fitted together from both sides, meeting in the middle with a keystone that locked everything in place. For the first time, the townspeople could see what Chen had been building. The graceful curves of the arches took their breath away. Maybe, they thought, maybe this engineer knew what he was doing after all. But Chen's 3-year estimate had been wildly optimistic. The bridge was not finished in 3 years. It took 5 years in total. 5 years of patient, meticulous work. When the scaffolding was finally removed and the bridge stood on its own for the first time, the townspeople gathered in silence. It was more beautiful than they had imagined. The 5 stone arches soared across the river with such grace that the massive structure seemed almost weightless. The roadway was wide and smooth. The railings were carved with protective symbols. It was a masterpiece. Chen stood among the crowd, exhausted but satisfied. The old anger at him had faded. People who had complained the loudest now praised him, conveniently forgetting their earlier criticisms. The local officials made speeches about the town's great achievement. Chen listened to all this with a slight smile. When it was his turn to speak, he kept his words simple. You see this bridge, he said. 5 graceful arches spanning your river. You admire the arches because they are visible, beautiful, dramatic. But everything you see rests on what you cannot see. Below the ground, there are foundations deeper than the bridge is tall. Those foundations took half the time and more than half the effort. They are invisible, ungraceful, unappreciated. But they are the reason this bridge will stand for 1,000 years. You wanted me to build the bridge quickly, to skip the tedious foundation work and get straight to the arches everyone could see. If I had done that, the bridge would have looked beautiful for perhaps 5 years before collapsing. Patient work on invisible foundations creates visible beauty that endures. He gestured at the river flowing beneath the arches. In your lives too, you want quick results. You want to see the arches while skipping the foundations. You want success without preparation, mastery without practice, results without patient effort. But anything of lasting value requires foundations you cannot see. Relationships need years of small, kind acts before they can support real intimacy. Skills need thousands of hours of practice before they support mastery. Character needs years of small, right choices before it can support integrity under pressure. Do not despise the invisible work. It is the only work that matters. The crowd dispersed slowly, some chastened by his words, others already forgetting the lesson. But the bridge remained, And it did indeed stand for 1,000 years, outlasting the towns it connected, outlasting the memory of Chen's name. Travelers would cross it and admire its graceful arches, never thinking about the foundations they could not see, foundations that made everything possible. This teaching speaks directly to our modern impatience with preparation, with groundwork, with the slow, invisible work that makes visible success possible. We want to skip to the exciting part. We want results now. We want to see progress immediately. But Chen's bridge teaches us that anything meant to last requires foundations deeper than the structure is tall, and those foundations take time. Think about someone building a business. They see successful companies and want to replicate that success quickly. They create the visible elements: a website, branding, marketing, maybe even some initial sales. But they skip the foundation work, really understanding their customers, developing operational systems, building financial reserves, creating a company culture. For a while, it looks like success. Then pressure comes, competition, economic downturn, internal conflict, and the business collapses because it was all superstructure with no foundation. Or consider someone trying to become a writer. They want to write a best-selling novel right away. They skip the foundation work of reading widely, studying craft, writing millions of words of practice, developing their unique voice. They produce a book quickly and are disappointed when it is mediocre. Meanwhile, the writers who spend years laying foundations, who read obsessively, who write story after story without publishing, who study sentence structure and character development and narrative arc, when they finally publish, their work has the solidity that comes from deep preparation. This happens in parenting too. Parents want well-adjusted, successful children, but they do not always want to do the slow foundation work of being consistently present, of having thousands of small conversations, of modeling the behavior they want to see, of creating family rituals and traditions. They want to skip to the part where their kids turn out great. But children are like bridges. Their character is built on foundations of daily experience, of how you respond when they make mistakes, of whether you follow through on promises, of the accumulation of small moments that teach them who they are and how the world works. The bridge that no one saw teaches us that the most important work is always invisible to outside observers. People see your success, but not the years of preparation. They see your skill, but not the thousands of hours of practice. They see your strong relationship, but not the daily choices to be kind, even when you do not feel like it. They see the bridge, but not the foundations. And because they do not see the foundations, they often do not respect the time it takes to build them. This is why people give up too soon. They spend a few months learning something and expect mastery. They put a year into a relationship and expect deep intimacy. They work on a creative project for a couple of months and expect brilliance. When they do not see dramatic results, they conclude they are doing it wrong or that it is not worth it. They abandon the project just when they should be doubling down on foundation work. They want to build arches before they have reached bedrock, and they wonder why everything they build falls down. What would it mean to embrace the foundation phase of your life or work, to accept that visible results will come later? But right now, you are doing the invisible work that makes those results possible. To trust that time spent in preparation is not wasted but essential. To be patient with yourself during the long period when there is nothing impressive to show others. Knowing that you are building something that will last. The bridge builder knows that foundations take half the time and more than half the effort. But they are not half the bridge. They are the entire bridge. Everything else is just decoration resting on that foundation. When you spend years building skill, building character, building understanding, you are not preparing to do something great later. You are doing the great thing. The foundation is not separate from the achievement. It is the achievement. The visible result is just the part that other people happen to notice. Breathe with this teaching. Feel the relief of accepting that foundations take time. Feel the satisfaction of knowing that invisible work is still meaningful work. Feel the patience that comes from trusting that bedrock is down there somewhere. And if you keep digging, you will reach it. And everything you build on that foundation will stand for 1,000 years. Just this foundation work. Just this patient digging until you reach bedrock. Just this trust that what cannot be seen is still real, still valuable, still essential. Just this faith that time spent in preparation creates results that endure. Just this willingness to work when no one is watching, when no one is impressed, when there is nothing to show for it yet. Just this deep foundation work. Just this. Let your awareness drift like clouds now. Your mind floats in vast spaciousness. We journey next to a monastery in Tibet, where a young monk learned about the patience required for understanding. The Sutra of 1,000 readings, high in the mountains of Tibet, in a monastery that clung to a cliff face like an eagle's nest, there lived a young monk named Tenzin who was known for his quick mind and sharp memory. He could hear a teaching once and recite it back perfectly. He could debate philosophy with monks twice his age and often win through clever logic. His teachers recognized his intelligence and gave him increasingly complex texts to study. Tenzin devoured them all, accumulating knowledge at a remarkable pace. One day, the abbot called Tenzin to his quarters. The old man sat in a room empty except for a cushion and a wooden table on which rested a single text. "This is the Heart Sutra," the abbot said, gesturing to the thin volume. "You will study this text and nothing else until I tell you to stop." Tenzin looked at the sutra with barely concealed disappointment. The Heart Sutra was one of the shortest Buddhist texts, only a few pages long. He had already read it several times and could recite much of it from memory. Studying only this when there were thousands of other texts to explore seemed like a waste of his abilities. The abbot seemed to read his thoughts. "You think you know this text because you have read it," he said gently. "But there is a difference between reading and understanding, between understanding and realizing, between realizing and embodying. You will read this sutra every day. You will contemplate it deeply. When you think you understand it completely, you will come tell me. Then I will know whether you are ready for other teachings or whether you need to continue." Tenzin bowed respectfully, though inside he was confident this would be a brief exercise. He returned to his cell with the text and began his study. The first week, he read the sutra multiple times each day, analyzing each line, memorizing the entire text perfectly, comparing different commentaries. By the end of the week, he felt he had a solid intellectual grasp of its meaning. The Heart Sutra taught about emptiness, about form and formlessness, about the nature of reality beyond conceptual thought. He went to the abbot prepared to demonstrate his understanding. The abbot listened to Tenzin's explanation, which was indeed sophisticated and well-reasoned. When Tenzin finished, the old man was quiet for a long time. Then he said simply, "You understand the words? Return to the text." Tenzin was frustrated but returned to his cell and continued reading. The second week, he focused on deeper meanings, on the philosophical implications, on how this teaching connected to other Buddhist concepts. He filled notebooks with insights and observations. Again, he went to the abbot. Again, the abbot listened patiently and said, "You understand the philosophy. Return to the text." This pattern continued for months. Each time Tenzin thought he had grasped the teaching, each time he returned to the abbot with what he believed was complete understanding, the old man would acknowledge what Tenzin had learned, but send him back to continue studying. "You understand the intellectual framework. Return to the text. You understand the logical arguments. Return to the text. You understand the historical context. Return to the text." Each time, the dismissal stung more sharply. What was he missing after a year of studying only this one short text? Tenzin's relationship with it had changed. He no longer approached it as a problem to be solved or a puzzle to be figured out. He simply read it each day, sometimes multiple times, letting the words wash over him without trying so hard to extract meaning. One morning, as he read a phrase he had read hundreds of times before, something shifted. The words seemed to open up, revealing not a new intellectual meaning but a direct experience of what they pointed toward. For just a moment, he experienced emptiness, not as a concept, but as reality. The moment passed, but it left him shaken and awed. He did not run to the abbot this time. He knew now that what he had experienced was just a glimpse, a crack in his conceptual understanding through which light had shone briefly. He continued his daily reading, no longer trying to understand, but simply being present with the text. More moments came, some brief, some longer, when the words seemed to dissolve and what they pointed to became directly apparent. These experiences could not be forced or predicted. They arose when his mind was open and receptive, when he stopped grasping at understanding and simply allowed the teaching to reveal itself. 2 years after beginning his study, Tenzin went to the abbot again. This time he did not offer explanations or demonstrations of knowledge. He simply said, "I am beginning to see." The abbot smiled, the first real smile Tenzin had seen in their many meetings. "Good," the old man said. "Continue." Tenzin bowed and left without disappointment. He understood now that this was not an assignment to complete, but a practice to deepen. The text was not a problem with a solution, but a doorway that opened gradually, revealing more the longer you stood before it. He continued reading the Heart Sutra daily for 5 years total. By then, the text had become part of him. He no longer needed to look at the words. They arose in his mind naturally throughout the day, commenting on his experience, revealing aspects of reality he had never noticed before. The teaching was no longer separate from his awareness. It had become the lens through which he saw everything. When the abbot finally called him and said he could now move on to other studies, Tenzin felt a strange reluctance. This text had become his friend, his teacher, his path. Leaving it felt like leaving home. The abbot saw his hesitation and laughed softly. "You do not need to stop reading it," he said. "I am simply saying you are ready for other texts as well." Many monks continue reading the Heart Sutra daily for their entire lives. Each reading reveals something new because they are new. Their understanding has deepened. Their experience has broadened. The text has not changed, but they have. This is why we return again and again to the foundational teachings. Not because we have forgotten them, but because we have become capable of understanding them at deeper levels. Tenzin asked, Why did you make me study only this text for 5 years? Why not let me read broadly? The abbot smiled. Because your quick mind was your gift and your obstacle. You collected knowledge like precious stones, but never stayed with any one teaching long enough to let it transform you. You understood everything intellectually and nothing experientially. By forcing you to stay with one text, I taught you the patience to let understanding ripen fully. This is more valuable than memorizing 1,000 texts. One teaching fully realized is worth more than 1,000 teachings partially understood. Years later, Tenzin became a respected teacher himself. Students would come to him eager to learn as much as possible as quickly as possible, just as he had once been. To each serious student, he would give a single text, often the Heart Sutra, and tell them to study it for at least a year before moving on. Some would protest that they already knew that text. He would smile and say what his abbot had said to him. You may know the words, but do you know what they point to? Most students would eventually leave, seeking teachers who would give them more teachings faster. But a few would stay, would do the deep work of dwelling with one teaching until it transformed them. Those few became truly realized practitioners. This teaching addresses our modern addiction to information, our belief that knowing more equals understanding more, our resistance to dwelling deeply with anything when there is always something new to learn. We live in an age of infinite information and zero attention. We can learn about anything instantly, but rarely take time to let any teaching truly penetrate. Tenzin's 5 years with one short text teaches us something radically different. Think about how we consume spiritual or self-help teachings now. We read a book that offers profound wisdom, and before we have put any of it into practice, we are on to the next book. We attend a workshop and learn life-changing techniques, and by the next week, we have forgotten them because we are learning something new. We follow teachers on social media, consuming daily doses of wisdom, but none of it sticks because we never stop consuming long enough to digest what we have taken in. It is like eating continuously without ever stopping to let your body process the food. You become bloated with information but malnourished of wisdom. The information never becomes knowledge because you never practice it. The knowledge never becomes wisdom because you never embody it. You can recite 100 profound teachings, but your life has not changed because you have not stayed with any teaching long enough for it to change you. Consider someone who reads books about meditation but never meditates, or someone who learns about mindfulness in a workshop but returns to constant distraction by the next day, or someone who intellectually understands that gratitude increases well-being but never actually practices gratitude. They have the information. They might even be able to teach it to others, but they do not have the benefit of it because information without embodiment is just more noise in an already noisy mind. The Sutra of 1,000 Readings teaches us that transformation requires repetition, not just reading something once and understanding it intellectually, but returning to it again and again until it becomes part of how you see the world. A teaching fully embodied through patient repetition is worth infinitely more than 100 teachings intellectually understood but never lived. This applies to any kind of deep learning. Musicians do not learn a piece by playing through it once and moving on. They play it hundreds of times, discovering new nuances each time, letting the music get into their hands and bones until they can express it with their whole being. Writers do not master their craft by reading about writing. They write the same kinds of scenes over and over, making mistakes, trying again, slowly internalizing what makes prose sing. Athletes do not develop skill by learning techniques once. They practice the same movements thousands of times until the skill becomes unconscious. Why do we think spiritual or personal development should be different? Why do we think we can read about patience once and become patient, read about compassion once and become compassionate, learn a meditation technique once and have a meditation practice? The development of wisdom requires the same patient repetition that develops any other skill. You have to return to the teaching again and again. Practice it. Live it. Let it reveal itself over time. What would it mean to choose one teaching that resonates with you and commit to it for a year? Not to collect more teachings, but to let this one teaching transform you. To read it or practice it daily. To let it become the lens through which you see your life. To discover, through repetition, that what seemed simple on first reading contains infinite depth. To learn through patient dwelling that transformation happens not through accumulating information, but through letting one truth penetrate completely. The young monk's quick mind was his gift, allowing him to learn quickly, and his obstacle, preventing him from learning deeply. Many of us have this same pattern. We are good at collecting information, at understanding intellectually, at impressing others with our knowledge. But we are not good at the patient work of letting one teaching ripen fully in us, of staying with something long enough for it to change not just our thinking, but our being. Breathe with this teaching. Feel what it would be like to stop consuming new information and instead dwell deeply with what you already know. Feel the relief of letting go of the pressure to learn more, and instead committing to embody something, anything, completely. One teaching fully lived is enlightenment. 1,000 teachings partially understood is confusion. Just this one teaching. Just this patient, returning again and again to the same wisdom. Just this trust that depth comes from repetition. That transformation requires dwelling. That you do not need more information, but deeper practice. Just this willingness to read the same words 1,000 times and discover something new each time. Just this patient deepening. Just this. Your consciousness drifts now in vast peaceful spaces. Your body has released all tension. We continue to a village in Vietnam, where a child learned about the patience of seeds. The gardener's daughter. In a small village in Vietnam's Mekong Delta, there lived a master gardener named Min who could grow anything. His garden was legendary, filled with vegetables so perfect and abundant that people came from neighboring villages just to see them. He grew tomatoes as large as melons, eggplants that gleamed like purple silk, herbs so fragrant they perfumed the entire street. But perhaps his most prized plants were his orchids, rare varieties that bloomed with extraordinary beauty. Min's daughter, Lin, was 7 years old when she first asked to help in the garden. Her father gave her a small plot of her own, perhaps 2 meters square, and a packet of morning glory seeds. Plant these, he told her. Water them every morning and watch what happens. Lin was thrilled. She planted the seeds that very afternoon, pressing each one carefully into the soil exactly as her father instructed. Then she watered them and stood back, waiting for them to grow. The next morning, she ran to her garden plot before breakfast, expecting to see sprouts. There was nothing, just bare brown earth. She watered the seeds and checked again in the afternoon. Still nothing. The next day was the same. And the next? After a week of seeing no change, Lin grew frustrated. "Bah," she said to her father, "I think my seeds are broken. I have watered them every day for a week and nothing is growing. Maybe I should plant new ones." Min smiled and knelt beside his daughter's plot. "The seeds are not broken," he said gently. "They are working. You cannot see it yet, but underground, each seed has absorbed water and begun to swell. Right now, the seed coat is splitting. A tiny root is beginning to push out, seeking downward into the soil. This root must establish itself before anything can grow upward. This takes time. Be patient. Keep watering. Trust the process. Lynn tried to be patient, but it was difficult. Every day she watered her plot and saw nothing. Meanwhile, her father's vegetables were growing visibly. His tomato plants were already a foot tall. His herbs were lush and full. Why did everything grow for him but nothing grew for her? After 2 weeks, she was ready to give up. This is stupid, she told her father. Nothing is happening. I have wasted 2 weeks on seeds that will not grow. Her father led her to his orchid house, a small structure where he kept his most precious plants. He pointed to several pots that held what looked like dead sticks planted in bark. These orchid cuttings, he told her, I planted 6 months ago. They still look dead, but they are alive. Inside, they are slowly growing roots, very slowly developing what they need to eventually produce leaves and flowers. If I judged them by what I can see, I would throw them away. But I know that invisible work is happening. I know that patience will be rewarded. So I water them, I care for them, and I wait. He turned to Lynn. Your morning glories are not as slow as my orchids, but they are teaching you the same lesson. Growth happens at its own pace. Seeds know what to do, but they cannot be rushed. If I dug up your seeds to check on them, I would destroy the delicate roots that are forming. The only thing you can do is provide the right conditions, water and sun, and then wait with faith that the seeds are doing their work even though you cannot see it. Lynn returned to her plot and continued watering, though with less enthusiasm. On the 18th day after planting, she went to water as usual and gasped. Tiny green loops were emerging from the soil, dozens of them across her plot. The morning glories had finally sprouted. Within 3 days, the plot was covered with small seedlings. Within 2 weeks, vines were climbing the small trellis her father had built. Within a month, her plot was a cascade of blue and purple flowers that opened each morning and closed each evening. Lynn was overjoyed and amazed. Bah, she said. They grew so fast once they started, her father laughed. They seemed to grow fast once you could see them growing. But they were growing all along, from the moment they were planted. The root growth you could not see was just as important as the leaf growth you can see now, perhaps more important. Strong roots are what allow rapid growth above ground. If the morning glories had pushed up leaves immediately without first developing roots, they would have been weak and easily damaged. By spending those first 18 days building a strong foundation underground, they prepared themselves for the healthy growth you now see. This lesson stayed with Lynn as she grew older and continued gardening with her father. She learned that lettuce germinates in 3 days, but carrots take 2 weeks. She learned that tomatoes produce fruit in 60 days, but papaya trees take a year. She learned that her father's most spectacular orchids were 8 years old before they bloomed for the first time. Everything had its own timing, its own pace that could not be rushed without damage. When Lynn was 15, she wanted to grow a particular rare orchid that her father had. He agreed to give her a cutting, but warned her it might take 10 years before it bloomed. 10 years, she exclaimed. I will be 25. I will be old, her father smiled. Yes, and you will be so glad you planted it today rather than waiting. 10 years will pass whether you plant it or not. The only question is whether at the end of those 10 years you will have an orchid or just regret that you did not start. So Lin planted the cutting and tended it carefully. Years passed. She finished school. She fell in love and married. She had a child of her own. Through all these changes, she continued caring for her orchid, watering it, giving it the specific conditions it needed, watching patiently as it very slowly grew. When she was 24, 9 years after planting it, a flower spike appeared. 6 months later, on her 25th birthday, the orchid bloomed with flowers, so exquisite she wept. Her father, now quite old, came to see it. His eyes shone with pride. "You see," he said, 10 years seemed impossible when you were 15. But you had patience. You trusted the timing. And now you have beauty that will bloom every year for the rest of your life." Lin's own daughter was now 7, the same age Lin had been when she started gardening. She asked if she could have her own garden plot. Lin gave her a small space and a packet of morning glory seeds, just as her father had done for her. She watched her daughter plant the seeds with such excitement, then check the next day and see nothing, then begin to grow impatient after a week. Lin knelt beside her daughter and told her about seeds working underground, about roots before leaves, about invisible growth. She told her about the orchid that took 10 years to bloom. She told her about patience, not as waiting passively, but as tending faithfully, watering consistently, trusting the process even when you see no results. Her daughter listened, but remained skeptical, just as Lin had been skeptical. That was fine. Lin knew her daughter would learn the same lesson she had learned, not through hearing about it, but through experiencing it, through watering bare ground day after day until the miracle of sprouting finally came. Through this experience, her daughter would learn patience, not as a virtue to aspire to, but as a practical reality of working with living things. She would learn that you cannot rush a seed. You can only provide what it needs and trust its wisdom to unfold in its own time. This teaching speaks to our impatience with anything that grows slowly, our frustration when we cannot see immediate results, our modern expectation that everything should happen quickly. The gardener's daughter learned what everyone who works with living things learns eventually, that growth has its own timing, that invisible work precedes visible results, that patience is not optional but essential. Think about children. We want them to develop quickly, to reach milestones early, to be advanced for their age. But children, like plants, develop at their own pace. Some walk early, some late, some read at 4, some at 8. Some are socially confident in preschool. Others do not find their social ease until adolescence. Pushing them to develop faster than they are ready can actually harm them, like pulling on a seedling to make it grow taller. What they need is the right conditions: safety, love, stimulation, appropriate challenges, and then patience while they develop at their own pace. Or consider creative projects. You start a novel, a painting, a business, and you expect to see progress immediately. After a week or a month, when you do not have anything impressive to show, you get discouraged. But like the morning glory seeds, creative work often involves a long period of invisible development. You are learning skills, developing ideas, making connections, building capacity. This feels like nothing is happening because there is no visible product yet. But when the roots are finally strong enough, growth above ground happens quickly. The novel pours out in months. The paintings come easily. The business takes off. The sudden growth is only possible because of the patient root building that came before. This happens with therapy and personal healing too. People often get frustrated because they do not feel better immediately. They have been in therapy for 6 months or a year and still struggle with the same patterns. They wonder if therapy is working at all. But healing, like seed germination, happens underground first. You are building new neural pathways, developing new ways of relating, strengthening psychological resources. This internal work takes time before you notice external changes in your life. Then one day, you realize you responded differently to a trigger. You notice you made a healthy choice automatically. You see that you are not who you were a year ago. The change seemed sudden, but it was the result of patient underground work. The gardener's daughter teaches us to trust the timing of living systems. Seeds know when to sprout. Children know when they are ready for the next developmental stage. Creative work knows when it is ready to emerge. Our bodies know how fast they can heal. We cannot rush these things through force of will. We can only provide the right conditions and trust the wisdom inherent in the growth process itself. This requires a specific kind of patience. The patience to continue caring for something when you see no evidence that your care is working. The patience to water bare ground day after day, trusting that something is happening even though you cannot see it. The patience to keep showing up to therapy, to your creative practice, to your meditation cushion, to your relationships, even when you do not see dramatic change. The patience to trust that your effort is not wasted, but is feeding invisible growth that will eventually become visible. What in your life needs this kind of patient tending? What are you trying to rush that needs to develop at its own pace? What invisible growth might be happening in areas where you see no visible progress yet? What would it mean to trust the timing of that growth? To continue providing what is needed? To wait with faith rather than anxiety? The orchid that took 10 years to bloom teaches us that some of the most beautiful things require the longest patience. 10 years seems impossible at the beginning. But if you plant the seed and tend it faithfully, 10 years passes and you have something extraordinary. The only alternative is to not plant at all and arrive at 10 years from now with nothing but regret for what you did not start. What are you not starting because the timeline seems too long? What mastery are you avoiding because it would take years? What relationship are you not investing in because deep intimacy takes time? What healing are you not pursuing because recovery is measured in years, not months? 10 years will pass, regardless. The question is whether you will spend those years tending something or wishing you had started. Breathe with this teaching. Feel the relief of accepting that some things simply take time. Feel the peace that comes from trusting natural timing rather than fighting it. Feel the patience that emerges when you understand that invisible work is still real work, that underground growth is still growth, that your faithful tending is never wasted, even when you cannot yet see results. Just this daily watering, just this faithful tending, just this trust that seeds know what to do if given the right conditions and enough time. Just this patient presence with growth that unfolds at its own pace. Just this willingness to care for what you cannot yet see, trusting it will emerge when it is ready. Just this patient gardening of your life. Just this. As our journey draws to a close, let yourself settle completely. Your breath is barely perceptible now, soft as moth wings. Your body rests in deep stillness. Tonight we have traveled together through 20 stories of patience and perseverance, ancient teachings that speak to your modern life. We have learned from the bamboo that grows roots for 5 years before showing itself above ground, teaching us that the most important work happens where no one can see. We walked with the young swordsman who discovered that rushing makes the journey longer, that one eye fixed on the destination leaves only one eye to see the path. We sat with the monk who polished a stone for 3 years and learned that you cannot grasp transformation. You can only grow it through patient presence. We stood in the farmer's field and understood that being first means nothing if you cannot endure. That deep roots, created through patient preparation, outlast quick growth that has no foundation. We raked the monastery garden 10,000 times and discovered that practice is not preparation for life, but life itself. We made 10,000 bowls and learned that mastery is not a destination but an endless path of bringing complete presence to repetition. We watched the wounded tree heal over 5 years, teaching us that deep wounds require deep time, that healing cannot be rushed, that we can become beautiful again after breaking. We practiced one brushstroke for a year and discovered that depth matters more than breadth, that going infinitely deep with one thing reveals everything. We waited with the fisherman to cast our net at exactly the right moment, learning to read patterns, to sense timing, to trust that patient watching is itself productive work. We stood beside the bellcaster for 20 years, understanding that some mastery simply requires decades, that this is not discouraging but appropriate, that time devoted to excellence creates beauty that endures for centuries. We made tea for 63 years and never stopped learning, discovering that mastery is endless, that every repetition reveals something new, that being a perpetual student is liberation, not limitation. We built a bridge and spent years on foundations no one could see, learning that anything meant to last requires invisible work that takes longer than anyone wants to wait. We read the same sutra for 5 years and discovered that one teaching fully embodied transforms you more than 1,000 teachings intellectually understood. And we planted seeds and waited for them to sprout, learning to trust the timing of living systems, to tend faithfully even when we see no results, to believe that invisible growth is still growth. These teachings are not just stories. They are invitations to live differently, to stop rushing, to trust natural timing, to bring patience to your own becoming, to understand that the deepest transformations happen slowly, invisibly, in their own time. You cannot force bamboo to grow faster. You cannot rush the healing of wounds. You cannot skip the foundation work that makes everything else possible. You can only show up faithfully, day after day, bringing whatever presence you have to whatever this moment requires, trusting that invisible work is accumulating, building something that will one day astonish you with its strength and beauty. As you drift into sleep now, let these teachings settle into your bones. Let them become part of how you see your life. Tomorrow, when you wake, you may notice small shifts. Perhaps you feel less urgency. Perhaps you trust your own timing more. Perhaps you bring patience to yourself or others who are growing at their own pace. These are the gifts of ancient wisdom, changing us gently from within, like water shaping stone, slowly but completely. If these stories brought you peace, if they helped you find rest, consider subscribing to this channel and liking this video so others may find these teachings too. But more than anything, I hope you sleep deeply. I hope you wake refreshed. I hope you carry with you the patient faith that you are growing in ways you cannot yet see, building foundations that will support the life you are becoming. unfolding at exactly the right pace, even when it feels too slow. You are the bamboo sending roots deep into earth. You are the tree healing slowly but surely. You are the seed working underground. You are the bellcaster learning year by year. You are the gardener tending faithfully. Trust your timing. Trust the invisible work. Trust the patient path. Rest now, dear friend. Rest in the knowing that patience and perseverance transform everything they touch. Rest in the faith that you are exactly where you need to be, growing exactly as you should, in perfect timing, even when you cannot see it. Sleep deeply. Wake gently. May you find peace in the patient unfolding of your one precious life. Good night.